In 2013, a Kickstarter campaign successfully funded Huniepop, a self-described puzzle dating game, or as the blurb refers to it as, a game that's part dating sim, part puzzle game, with light RPG elements. If you asked me to describe Huniepop, I would likely describe it the same way. One part dating sim, one part puzzle game, in equal measure. I'd heard a lot about Huniepop before its release. It had a lot of buzz surrounding it, as any successfully kickstarted project might. While the pitch sounds good on paper, I'm also positive that some people who donated, and even some that might not have donated, were watching Huniepop's development with scrutinous intent, either eager to see the game come to fruition, or preemptively mocking what detractors believe to be another Kickstarter dumpster fire. In 2015, Huniepop was released, and surprisingly to glowing praise. It technically holds an 80 out of 100 on Metacritic, because only one reputable gaming news source bothered to actually give it a review score. Regardless, hardcore gamer writer Jeff Thu says, Huniepop is pornography. Darn fine pornography at that, but it's also a shockingly good puzzle game. Occasionally, those two identities feel at odds with each other, but for the most part they work in concert to show you a good time. Kotaku writer Mike Fahey wrote, I've seen a lot of people comparing Huniepop to Candy Crush Saga. That's doing Huniepop's version of Match 3 a grave disservice. Compared to this game's smart, tactical puzzle gameplay, Candy Crush is just a bit of fluff. This is a game about planning ahead, building resources, and using power-ups wisely. While the pretty pictures of anime women are lovely as well, it's the deep challenging puzzle action that's the star of the show. Even more shockingly than some critics' vocal praise of the gameplay aspects of Huniepop, however, was the game's release on the digital storefront. Although it's a far cry from it now, Steam was originally very restrictive on what kind of content was and wasn't allowed in their digital market space. Nowadays, Steam is overrun with hardcore pornographic titles, such as Foodafix Dick Dine and Dash and Friendship with Benefits, a My Little Pony dating simulator which uses extremely obvious anthropomorphic caricatures of the characters from the show to avoid any potential lawsuits or litigations, which one of my friends has over 1,000 hours in game. How is that even possible, Sophia? What I mean to say is that it was a different time. Quality control was a lot more rigorous a few years ago. One look at the Steam store homepage now will tell you that much. Although the Steam version released concurrently via Humble Bundle and Manga Gamer, it was also notoriously censored. But that didn't stop the developer himself from including step-by-step instructions on how to uncensor the in-game censorship. For myself personally, I thought the idea of the game was novel. I won't deny that the explicit reward of lewd imagery was a draw either. The game's bizarre and fortuitous existence on Steam was what persuaded me to buy and play it. One might even say that it was the precursor to having fully pornographic video games becoming available on the platform altogether. In that sense, Huniepop can also be considered a hallmark of the cultural gaming landscape in the mid-2010s. It's true that despite the game marketing itself as a dating sim puzzle RPG, the gaming media and the general public quickly abandoned the tacky, superficial genre codifiers of dating sim and puzzle role-playing game and settled on a much more apt categorization: hentai game. Although technically a misnomer, and I won't get into why emulating a generic anime art style makes an animated work anime or a pornographic work hentai, I will say that it works on a technical level. The term eroge, a portmanteau of erotic and game, has existed in Japan since the early 1980s. In that sense, Huniepop can be considered a fully realized Western eroge title. Of course, with great potential comes great exploitation. My friend Brendan has given this game a recommended review on Steam. In his short but sweet review, he says, Huniepop is the only bejeweled game that rewards you with hentai. And although that might have been true at the time he posted this review, in November of 2015, not so anymore. Purino Party, Booty Calls, Adorable Crush, Pussy Saga, Mirror, Tower of Waifus, Love Fantasy. These are just the ones I found by looking, and I'm sure there's more out there. My point is that the main conceit of Huniepop, the draw, cannot be boiled down to just bejeweled with hentai, because it really was much more than the sum of its parts. In so many words, the best way I can describe Huniepop as a game is, I came for the smut, and I stayed for the puzzles. Huniepop 2 was officially announced in 2018, and that's according to Wikipedia, but I'm pretty sure it was mentioned as early as 2016 and released this year in 2021. Now, I don't need to recapitulate last year for anyone, but all I'll say is after 2020, I really needed another Huniepop game. Within the interim between Huniepop and its sequel was Honeycam Studio, a business tycoon-like spin-off game which I'll only briefly mention because I'll be talking about it again later. Besides Honeycam Studio, however, I realized that my life had been severely lacking in Huniepop since 2015. Looking back at my unlocked achievements on Steam, I can only tally my total playtime between early March and mid-April of 2015, meaning that I had only played the game consistently for a little over a month before putting it down. In other words, it had been a whole 6 years since the first Huniepop, and since I had played the first Huniepop. I was really looking forward to Huniepop 2. Even so, the release couldn't have come at a worse time. My wallet was looking light, and so I turned to Steam's finicky family sharing feature to mooch off my best friend Garrett's copy of Huniepop 2 whenever he wasn't playing it. This was a very brief give and take. I'd only played several hours before I received an item in my Steam inventory from none other than Garrett himself. A personal copy of Huniepop 2 with the attached message. Horny. I want to play right now. Best wishes. Horny. Although we're 6 or 7 minutes into the video and I haven't even started talking about the game in question, I'll start with one of my several thesis statements. Huniepop 2 is not a game about surprises, it's a game about expectations. The developer of Huniepop 2 was very forthcoming and transparent with the status of the game's development. This is why people were aware of each character that was to be included with the game in advance. As such, there are no surprises in Huniepop 2. The roster of characters at the title screen are the same roster of characters you'll be with for the duration of your playtime. Huniepop 1 had some secret characters that were acquired either through completionist bonuses or some other strange video gamey side quest weirdness. This isn't the case in Huniepop 2. The story starts with Q Sugared Us, the fairy instigator and certified best girl from Huniepop 1, giving a voiceover and explaining the plot hook. Two extremely pissed off spirits, or gods or something, it's really unclear, known as the NYMPHOJINN are about to wake up from a 10,000 year slumber, and if that happens then the world is forfeit. That is, however, until she mentions that she might know somebody that can satisfy these nigh unstoppable demigods' sexual appetite.
I might know somebody.
Enter us, the player from the first Huniepop nads deep in some hole named Ashley. Ashley is the first new character in Huniepop 2, and from a design standpoint I think she's one of my favorite new additions, although I'll go into more detail on my thoughts about the character lineup later on. Q arrives and gives us an even more truncated version of the voiceover exposition to convince us to come with her to a tropical island resort on Ina de Puna so that we can harvest 24 pairs of fairy wings for some arcane ritual to gain an audience with the NYMPHOJINN or something. I don't know. To be perfectly honest, the fate of the world resting on our player character arranging 24 three-ways to have an interstellar threesome with two extremely horny and pissed off demigods was not exactly what I wanted out of Huniepop 2, but I don't feel as though the wacky story adds or detracts anything from the experience overall. On the plane to Ina de Puna, we cross paths with Lola Rembright, a character from the first game and one of the two returning characters from Huniepop 1. In an airplane bathroom, Q explains the new mechanics of Huniepop 2's new puzzle gimmick, the double date. I'll have a lot more to say about the double date and its mechanical significance later. From a purely first impressions standpoint, however, I was really looking forward to the new layer of complexity this edition would have on gameplay. The main differences are obvious. Stamina meters force players to consider each move ahead of time, and also encourage a constant back and forth between both girls. For example, one big 4 or 5 match move can drain 2 or 3 blocks of stamina respectively instead of just one, but big matches like this can also give 2 or 3 times the amount of affection, meaning that they're still valuable moves, but very situational and even taxing on a player's resources. Too many big moves at once and you might find yourself in a predicament where both girls only have 1 or 2 blocks of stamina, unable to make any big moves at all. The addition of stamina does create some interesting and frustrating scenarios. When you finally step off the plane and onto the island, you're greeted by none other than Ashley Rosemary from the intro. From here the game branches off as you meet new characters and discover new pairings for the elusive threesomes your character must procure in order to save the world. However, and this is where one of the major changes in Huniepop 2 makes itself apparent, the actual sex is no longer a reward for successfully courting each individual character. The double date mechanic has the process of becoming friends and becoming friends with benefits to a simple two-step process. Ensure two women are compatible and then confirm that they are attracted to one another. Although the outcome is never really in doubt, if there is compatibility between two women, they will express interest in each other at the end of the first date. At the end of the second date, each woman will admit to her feelings for one another, and the player gets down and dirty then and there. There are 24 fairy wings to collect. The player acquires fairy wings at the end of every bonus round, aka every sex scene, aka every 30-second puzzle section where you can't lose, and during which every correct match makes either girl moan uncontrollably. This being the case, we can also assume that there's 48 dates the player has to complete, one to ensure compatibility and attraction, and another to seal the deal. Being that there are 12 unique girls in the original Huniepop, each of which you had to take out on 4 separate dates to be rewarded with a bonus round and earn their trophy Not Safe for Work image, that also means that there would be exactly 48 individual dates across the first game as well. I've heard some criticism surrounding this game that 2 dates doesn't feel like enough time to get to know these characters, and that 2 dates and 1 sex scene doesn't have the same amount of reward as 4 dates does on the first Huniepop, and playing through Huniepop 2 for the first time, I did have to agree with these criticisms. Having finished the game now, I think this change lends itself to the game's emphasis on puzzle over dating sim. You still get 4 unique dates with each girl, just with different combinations of each character. To me, this change also conveys that showcasing more smut more often was another deliberate design choice for the sequel. For a lot of people, I think this change highlights a lot of the differences between the two games, notably how and where the game chooses to focus its resources. Even if it does act in favor of a game that rewards its players with sex more often, I still can't deny that my time spent with these virtual girls does feel cheapened by this shift in focus. The first Huniepop is a puzzle game cleverly disguised as a dating sim. Although I referred to Huniepop as it refers to itself as a dating sim puzzle game, it's more accurate to call it a dating sim which acts in service of the Bejeweled/Candy Crush aspects of the game. These aspects, which I feel are what kept me playing Huniepop 1 even long after I had finished courting each and every anime babe I had come into contact with. Although I still can't deny what attracted me to the game to begin with. I don't think it's a stretch to assume that most people have played Huniepop because it promised players that they would be able to collect a gallery of fully nude anime women. I can't prove this, but it's what attracted me and I'm sure what attracted many others. Even I'm aware of how ridiculous this sounds to the average viewer. I came for the smut and I stayed for the puzzles has the same type of energy as telling somebody that you watch hentai for the plot. I will still defend Huniepop 1 as a legitimately good and fun puzzle game. The dating sim aspects can be taken as they are or ignored entirely, although they are the context and the interface with which players navigate from puzzle to puzzle with. Even so, I still enjoyed the dating sim aspects of Huniepop 1. They were very light and personally unobtrusive. I remember seeing a lot of Huniepop 1 pre-release content involving character dialogue, specifically the introduction of Audrey, which was criticized and laughed at for being hilariously unanime-like.
I hurt your whore feelings.
A conversation that left a lasting impression on anybody who decided to play, or might have even informed some people not to play. To be perfectly honest, if Audrey's introduction were anybody's first impressions of Huniepop, I would also understand their aversion to the dating sim aspects of the game, or the entire game as is. Although each woman in Huniepop, excluding Kyu and the secret characters, fit easily into a few distinct categories, i.e. Jessie is the MILF, Tiffany is the schoolgirl, Aiko is the Asian teacher, etc., Audrey is the first big shock to the system, a girl who seems to have more in common with Newgrounds anime dating sim characters or literally any character in the Ghost Stories English dub.
Stop being such a freaking skank and give her back!
Don't blame me, ho! I didn't force you into this. You're the ones who said you wanted to do it. So there.
Sometimes yes means no.
And sometimes you're a bitch.
Than with any other solitary character in Huniepop. Let's call a spade and say that the dating sim aspect of Huniepop 1 was nowhere near perfect. Even so, I remember a lot of the characters and their personalities very clearly, with the exception of maybe Belly and Kiana. Players could spend as much time as they wanted learning about a girl's personal life, her hobbies, her likes, her dislikes, her background, her occupation. All of this contributes to a much more fully realized character than generic anime girl that is also Mexican or Asian or Indian. Huniepop 1 also uses the dating sim aspect to serve the puzzle gameplay. You earn money by completing dates successfully, and you use that money to buy gifts which can be given to girls in exchange for honey, which can then be used to upgrade the effectiveness of certain token matches during puzzles. There's also special gifts for each girl, made apparent by a tiny heart beside them, which can be given in exchange for a date gift which provides numerous benefits during a puzzle segment. Food is given to a girl to get them to talk more, and the more you talk to a girl, the more you learn about her and the more honey you earn when talking to her and answering her questions right. Sometimes you need to tell them what they want to hear, other times they'll quiz you about something they've already told you. It's important to keep track of what you've already asked because asking a repeat question doesn't yield any additional honey. Alcoholic drinks can also only be given at night and in certain places, and they greatly increase the amount of honey you can obtain from a girl by talking to her. Also noteworthy is how entering a date with a filled hunger or alcohol meter can give players 4 extra moves or 4 extra sentiment at the start of a date. This is something I only learned very recently, and I was surprised the game never explained it to me proper. In the first Huniepop, you have 12 total hunger blocks which can be filled by giving a girl food. The amount of hunger a food item restores is proportional to the price of the item. $100 for 1 block of hunger means that food items worth 300 or 400 money will fill 3 or 4 blocks of hunger respectively. It's easy to glance at the price of an item and know exactly how many blocks of hunger the item will fill. Girls will only accept food items that appeal to their tastes. Huniepop includes a star symbol next to each food item that the current girl will accept. If the food item doesn't have a star symbol next to it, the girl won't accept it. This means that only some of the food items available in the store will work on certain girls. Likewise, the same principle occurs with gifts. This creates situations where you can go on up to 4 dates with 4 different girls in one day, but you won't be able to earn additional honey from all of them because the shop only refreshes once per day. It also gives players the option to get more honey from girls, or just feed them for the additional moves during the date. Huniepop 2 makes these aspects of the dating sim half of the game extremely obvious and important. The double date gimmick also comes with some heavy rebalancing, and this is most obvious in how food items and the stamina meter is handled. Instead of a hunger bar like in Huniepop 1, Huniepop 2 uses the stamina meter. This does one of 2 things. It makes it so that talking before a date comes with a very pertinent price: 2 full blocks of stamina. In Huniepop 2, each girl's stamina meter has 6 blocks of stamina at full, although she starts with 4 blocks of stamina before a date begins. By talking to a girl, you are effectively halving your initial playing power in the opening moves of a date. The trade-off, however, is that every time you talk to a girl, you also get an additional move, which is immediately communicated to the player via the move counter, which is at the center of the pop-up menu at the bottom of the screen. I think this is a much more elegant solution and effective way to convey to players that talking to girls is a worthwhile trade-off. You can acquire up to 5 extra moves by talking to either woman before starting a date. However, this is a decision that shouldn't be made lightly. Although you can obtain up to 5 extra moves and feed the girls to replenish their stamina before the date begins, the game only allows for a total of 2 food items to be given to either girl. That means you can give 1 food item to each girl, or 2 food items to one girl, but no more. This means that you won't be able to enter any given date with the full stamina meter and the 5 extra moves. You have to choose one or the other, or find a nice balance somewhere in between. Earlier, I praised Huniepop 1's shop system, and now, although I'm praising Huniepop 2's much more interesting approach to the dating sim aspect of the dating sim puzzle game, I do think it takes a step back in terms of readability and accessibility. The shop menu now fits onto one screen. However, the items are scrambled haphazardly all over the display. The menu shows no star or heart symbols as in Huniepop 1 to indicate that the available items are of any benefit to the current pair of women you're trying to court before a date, and they aren't grouped together in any functional way. Items are instead separated by seed type. Seeds are Huniepop 2's type of currency. They're awarded at the end of a successful date, much in the same way money was in Huniepop 1. I think the function of the seeds are to diversify the player's spending options to ensure that the player will always have some abundance or shortage of any of the 4 currencies at any given time. making them think about their spending habits between dates and to work within their limitations. That's what I think the purpose of the seeds are anyways. In-game it feels like an arbitrary change, a reinvention of the wheel. Money worked just fine in the first game and the seeds don't add anything, but they make the visual clutter of the store much more obnoxious than it needs to be in my opinion. It's also true that you can hold the right mouse button to view all items of a similar type to the one originally hovered over, but I don't feel like this change was a step in the right direction. I would have preferred having the menu separate items by food and gifts like in the first game. I also want to acknowledge that I wrote this part before version 1.0.4, which did add a separate tab for separating items, although functionally it acts the same as holding down the right button, and also off script for this part. I think I kind of understand why seeds were the way they were, and how they're implemented, because it's instead of money and honey, it's just seeds, and you can only spend seeds so often. Like, you have to manage, oh, do I want the date gift or do I want the smoothie? And if I spend a lot today, then I won't have that much tomorrow. It depends who you're seeing that day. So like, from a technical standpoint, I understand why seeds might have made sense. I just think that maybe unifying everything to one currency instead of diversifying it further would have been preferable. But you know, it's like apples and oranges. It's really up to preference, and I harp on about it a lot here. I don't actually think it's like a grave sin the game commits, but I'll get there when I get there. There's also the fact that some food items don't restore stamina, but just give you an extra move or two depending on the recipient's favorite trait, or grant extra sentiment or passion before a date. Which, some of these just seem like flat out wastes, but some later dates I found myself opting for the extra sentiment because I really had to use some date gifts before the first move, otherwise the date would get real shitty real fast. Giving unique gifts or shoes now also drains one block of stamina, which is a really weird change that I don't think adds any kind of interesting choice or dynamic to the game. I ended up giving most unique gifts to characters so long as it wasn't before a date. All it really ends up doing is deterring players from going on dates right away, which seems unnecessary. It doesn't add anything, and I'm not a fan of the change. Where I think Huniepop 2's UI excels is the actual pre-date screen. Both girls are positioned on either side of the screen. Their respective talk icons beside them, the store and gifts icons are directly underneath for easy access, and the stats, girls, and finder menus are directly beneath. All the icons are arranged in an ascending pyramid of importance, which culminates with the crown jewel bright pink date icon. The pop-up menu at the bottom also clearly conveys a girl's most and least favorite traits, which is a definitive upgrade over having to check your honeybee constantly if you forgot in Huniepop 1. The character portraits done in Honeycam Studios style are also incredibly cute callbacks, and I enjoy them quite a lot. Now that I've successfully avoided talking about the game in this video about which... Now that I've successfully avoided talking about the game in this video about the game which this video is talking about, I think it's time to introduce the second thesis statement of this drawing series of conceits, which I will eventually circle back around to. And that conceit is, Huniepop 1 was a dating sim puzzle game, Huniepop 2 is a strategy puzzle game. Huniepop 1 was a half-hearted attempt at a dating sim. To be perfectly honest, I haven't played very many dating sims, so I don't know how accurate of a statement that is, but I think it's obvious to anyone who has played Huniepop 1 that the puzzle aspect was the main focus of the game overall. Likewise, anyone who has played Huniepop 2 also knows that the puzzle aspect is not only the main focus of the game, but the whole game. Huniepop 2 is a game about expectations. Its systems might be ineloquently elaborate at times, but this makes them no less pressing or uncontestable. In other words, the game might be confusing and difficult, but there is a learning curve. Make no mistake about it either, I do stand by my assertion that Huniepop 2 is a strategy puzzle game. Although the sections in between dates do seem to wear the mask of quote-unquote dating sims, these brief sections are purely functional intermissions, or prep time before sortie.
音楽スタートと同時に AT フィールドを展開。あとは作戦通りに。二人ともいいわね。了解。
Let's shift gears for a second. Let's talk about golf. Pia Nilsson and Lynn Marriott, in their seminal book, Every Shot Must Have a Purpose, introduced the concept of a think box and a play box. Although I'm using this example, it's mainly because I heard the term in an anime series of all places. Eyeshield 21, about a kid turned running back for his high school football team. Good anime, I recommend it, although I haven't read the manga yet. Anyways, there's this scene in the second half of the series where Haruma, an upperclassman and the Damon Devilbats quarterback, who for some reason reminds me of Dio Brando from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure if Dio Brando was an angsty high school bad boy with Joseph Joestar levels of mind games and an affinity for guns. Tells Eyeshield 21, Senna, that he needs to quit overthinking when he's out on the field during a play. He brings up the think box and the play box by name. The think box is training, preparation, pre-planning, setting up dominoes, and predicting how they'll fall. The play box is how that information from the think box is used. In Pia Nilsson and Lynn Marriott's book, I'm sure that they were trying to convey that there comes a point where planning becomes pointless. Eventually, every player has to make a decision and commit to the play. I was gonna try using this to explain the divide between the pre-date and the date in Huniepop 2, but the analogy isn't perfect. While there is plenty of time to plan ahead, the actual puzzle is not something that lends itself to impulsive gameplay. No, the dates in Huniepop 2 are slow, daunting minefields, deliberate decisions to be thoroughly considered, the ramifications to be calculated and coldly executed. Huniepop 2 is a game that evolves. It's a game that feels completely different from itself at each stage of one player's journey from beginning to middle to end. It's a game that demands the player to scale at an incredibly steep learning curve, and it isn't afraid to stonewall its audience for the lesson to be learned.
Was it something I did? Sorry, I was trying my best not to screw anything up.
Although I briefly described the game and some major and minor differences between it and the original, I haven't really delved very deep into the actual moment-to-moment gameplay of Huniepop 2. I assume you're watching this because you've played the game already, but on the off chance you haven't, you might be wondering if this game is actually any good. Are the changes from Huniepop 1 to Huniepop 2 a net positive, or does the game falter and fail to capitalize on what made the first game so great to begin with? I won't lie to you, at any given point during my first playthrough with this game I would have given you a different answer. There were some times I was frustrated beyond words. There were also some points where I was absolutely enthralled by the game and its presentation. I realize I haven't mentioned it yet, but the background artwork and music are particularly high quality. The artwork sets the stage well, and the music is so much better than a game about tricking girls into Candy Crush threesomes has any right to be. Rooftop Lounge. Secret Grotto. Aquarium. And the Royal Suite are all beautiful tracks with a breathtaking string section. My favorite track by far, Private Table, has some truly gorgeous instrumentation. Honorable mention to the second best song in the game, Strip Club, which has so much drip it puts Lusty's nightclub from the first Huniepop to shame. Also, because I couldn't really find a good place to mention this, I think that the sound design in both Huniepop games are especially memorable. The satisfying pop of a correct match, the blissful ring of a joy token match, the juicy texture of...
Sometimes I look out over this sprawling resort and think, I could do better.
The UI, and I would be remiss to mention the unfortunate glass-shattering sound effect that occurs whenever accidentally matching 3 or more broken heart tokens. After my 8th pair of fairy wings had been acquired, I noticed that something had shifted. My next few dates were failures. The difficulty's gradual incline had finally gotten steep enough that I was beginning to notice. Several more failed dates, and I had to put the game down for a day and come back to attack it from a different angle. Apparently this wasn't an uncommon occurrence either. I originally played through the entire game on the hardest difficulty, also known as the incel difficulty. According to people on the Steam store page in the discussion forum section of the Steam community tab, there are some people who claim that Average Guy, the medium difficulty, is too hard. Others claim it's too easy. There are also those that claim that Incel is too easy, but I think those people are lying because in my humble opinion, Incel is a ball-busting difficulty that is more frustrating than it is rewarding. And all you'll really get out of beating it is the satisfaction of having done so. That brings me to my third thesis statement. Huniepop 2 is the Dark Souls of bejeweled hentai games. I really wanted to have that be the title of this video, but then I realized I didn't really believe in the implications that statement would have. Huniepop 2 blows Huniepop 1 out of the water in terms of difficulty, absolutely. It's also more polished than Huniepop 1. It can be played in a normal resolution in full screen mode for one, But considering how many people copied Huniepop 1 wholesale, it might be more accurate to call the first Huniepop the Dark Souls of bejeweled hentai games, not in terms of difficulty, but in terms of influence in the gaming space. That brings me to my third thesis statement, revised. Huniepop 2 is the Dark Souls 2 or Dark Souls 3 of bejeweled hentai games. It is generally considered as hard or harder than the original, but in different ways. Both games changed fundamentals of the core formula that didn't really need to be changed. Both games focus on fighting multiple enemies at once.
Do you understand?
Both games rehash material from the original to varying degrees of success. And fans argue constantly over which one is better. Dark Souls 1 was a monumental game because its appeal was omnipresent. It was the golden standard, the template of all action-adventure RPGs that succeeded it, just as Huniepop 1 was the template for all bejeweled hentai games that succeeded it. Dark Souls 2 and 3 were less interested in creating a new golden standard for action-adventure RPGs and instead cultivated an identity for the Souls series. Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 took what worked and what didn't work in Dark Souls 1, and both came to two equidistant conclusions that were vastly different yet surprisingly the same. Huniepop 2 cultivates an identity for itself by using the first Huniepop as a template. What it does exceedingly well, but the game is as ambitious as it is flawed. We've already talked about how the dating sim aspects of Huniepop 1 have some bearing on the date sections of the game. How buying gifts and giving girls alcohol will yield more honey when talking to them, which can then be used to purchase upgrades for traits, an integral part of the main progression of Huniepop. Even if it sounds weird, I genuinely think that the slower paced talking sections of Huniepop 1 work to flesh these characters out. You learn a lot about these women by talking to them, and because they later quiz you on your knowledge of them based on questions you've already asked, it also means you have incentive to remember more about them. Or you could be like me and keep all the info saved on a notes document on your phone. After a successful date in Huniepop 1, you'll receive a photo text message from your courted woman of choice, complete with a funny little caption. These photos become more and more lewd as the dates continue, but each caption also characterizes the woman well. In my opinion, it makes these characters seem that much more attracted and vulnerable to you, the player. Sure, Huniepop 1's dating sim sections still alternate between girls giving you brief pop quizzes on what their birth dates are, or their favorite colors, or asking you random questions that only yield honey if you answer in a certain way. But these women aren't looking for honesty. They're looking to hear what they want to hear. It's not about being honest. In Huniepop 2, being dishonest is the name of the game. Huniepop 2 is a game about expectations. At this point, I was roughly 10 hours into Huniepop 2. I had already caught up to my friend Garrett in playtime, the same man who'd bought me the game so that I might play without using his Steam library to do so, and here I was about to surpass him. It was also at this point that I realized that that shift I had felt earlier, when I had started to fail spectacularly on date after date after date, was because I was no longer under the presumption of Huniepop 2 being anything close to a dating sim. Huniepop 2 wears the mask of a dating sim, but it is not a dating sim. Huniepop 2 is love and war, and all is fair in love and war. That's not a thesis statement, that just sounded cool, and I wanted to bookend this section by saying that. I reason that there's nothing close to a dating sim in Huniepop 2 because there are no dates. Your goal is not to have any kind of relationship with these women, Your goal is to bang 2 girls at once to acquire their unique fairy wings and use them to save the world. Yes, you do go on dates in Huniepop 2, but these are only functional insofar that you need to go on dates to build that trust to get your pairing of choice into a 3-way. A 3-way that is necessary to saving the world. To that end, Huniepop 2 is also like the Whose Line Is It Anyway of dating sim puzzle games, because Huniepop 2 is the game where the plot is made up and the girls don't matter. This isn't a thesis statement either, by the way. This brings me to my next inconvenient truth, which is that while the girls in Huniepop 2 are functional from a gameplay perspective, they feel less like characters and more like, as Reddit user Johnny11895 describes them, gameplay modifiers dressed up as girls. Let me digress for a moment because I don't want to talk about Honeycam Studio any more than I have to. I played it when it came out and never really got too deep into it from what I remember. I played it for around 10 hours and dropped out. Almost all of the characters from Honeycam Studio were carried over into Huniepop 2. Initially, I thought this was a really novel idea. I liked the designs of all of the Honeycam girls and I was looking forward to seeing them be fully realized in an art style more akin to the first game. Also, Marlena, Nadia, and Renee are the only holdovers from Honeycam that didn't make it into the sequel, which is interesting. So as of now, they're exclusive to Honeycam Studio, and I don't know if there'll ever be a Huniepop 3, so I guess they're just there now, forever. I'm just going to throw this out here, and I won't spend too long talking about it, but I'm going to front end this by saying that Huniepop 2 takes place 2 years after Huniepop 1. That's canon. Look at Jessie and Lola's ages and you can see that. Okay? So where does Honeycam Studio fit in? According to Jessie's age, she's the same age as in Huniepop 1, so that leads you to believe that Honeycam Studio takes place about the same time as Huniepop 1, maybe either before or after the events of that game. Looking at Tiffany's age, she's 1 year younger than she was in Huniepop 1. She's 19 years old in Honeycam Studio. Because we also know that Tiffany was born in December and Jessie was born in January, we also have a pretty good idea of where Huniepop 1 takes place. But this means that the events of Huniepop 1 take place somewhere between Tiffany just turning 20 and Jessie's 37th birthday. That also means that the events of Honeycam Studio take place before Tiffany's 20th birthday and Jessie's 37th birthday, since she's still the same age in Honeycam Studio. Now, here's where things start getting messy. In Huniepop 1, Nikki Ann Marie is 18 years old, but in Honeycam Studio, she's 20 years old. 2 years older than she was in Huniepop 1. So, what does this mean? Well, if our hypothesis is correct, putting Occam's razor to use, i.e. the simplest explanation is the right one, we have to assume that this Nikki Ann Marie is the same Nikki Ann Marie from Huniepop 1, and that she was lying about her age. So that's all well and good, but then we come to Zoe Green. Zoe is 21 years old in Honeycam Studio and 19 years old in Huniepop 2, meaning that logically Honeycam Studio should take place 2 years after Huniepop 2. Except we know that's not right because we know that Huniepop 1 and Honeycam Studio take place around the same time because of Tiffany and Jessie's ages. So what can we conclude from this? If we assume that Zoe is also lying about her age in Honeycam Studio, then we assume that her age in Huniepop 2 is correct, and if Huniepop 2 takes place 2 years after Honeycam Studio, we can assume that Zoe was either 18 or younger in Honeycam Studio, which puts us into some really dicey territory. But let's ignore all that for a second. Let's assume Zoe's the outlier, the exception to the rule. After all, she's easily the most esoteric and spiritually attuned girl in Huniepop 2, and displays numerous instances of extrasensory perception and some latent psychic abilities. If she's not lying about her age in either game, we can assume that some time travel shenanigans are at play here.
Wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Can we assume our hypothesis is correct by comparing characters from both Huniepop 1 and Huniepop 2 to their appearance in Honeycam Studio? Nora is 29 years old in Huniepop 2 and 21 years old in Honeycam Studio. We can say she's lying about her age in Honeycam Studio to pretend to be younger than she actually is, which means she might actually be 27 years old in Honeycam Studio. Aiko is 1 year older in Honeycam Studio as well. If we're to believe that Huniepop 1 takes place in between late December and early January, then either something is wrong or Aiko lied about her birthday in Huniepop 1 because she would turn 29 in November, not December or January. I know that this would technically make sense if we ignore Tiffany's birthday altogether, but now we have to discuss a few more returning Huniepop 1 characters because this is when it gets ugly. Lola Rembright is 24 years old in Huniepop 1 and 26 years old in Huniepop 2. This makes logical sense because the games are 2 years apart in universe. Except in Honeycam Studio, Lola Rembright is 27 years old, 3 years removed from Huniepop 1 and another year removed from Huniepop 2. Does Honeycam Studio take place after Huniepop 2? Is Jessie lying about her age in Honeycam Studio, pretending to be the same age as in Huniepop 1 but divulging the truth to the protagonist in Huniepop 2? Kiana also seems to support the theory that Honeycam Studio takes place 3 years after Huniepop 1 and 1 year after Huniepop 2 because she's 21 years old in Huniepop 1 and 24 years old in Honeycam Studio. But now we come to Audrey, who is 3 years younger in Honeycam Studio. Of course, we could handwave this away and say that she's also lying about her age. But then we have Belly from Huniepop 1, who is now 5 years older in Honeycam Studio.
What does that mean?
So we have to ask ourselves who's telling the truth? Who's lying and why are they lying about their age? Is any of this actually canon to the storyline, or did the developer not care enough to make Honeycam Studio make sense? Or is it all canon? Can you really trust anyone? Also, one last quick aside, I pulled the ages of all the Honeycam Studio girls from this guide I found on Steam called Honeybee Cam Girl Edition, and I'll link it in the description. And the author of this guide is utterly dumbfounded by all of the plot inconsistencies. It's hilarious. It starts out with a few question marks when the author realizes that Tiffany is 1 year younger and Nikki is 2 years older, and then they get really vocal when Kiana is revealed to be 3 years older. And at one point they even describe Honeycam Studio as a temporal nexus, and that description just feels really good to me. Character-wise, Huniepop 2 has more in common with Honeycam Studio than with Huniepop 1. Although the character portraits are done in the style of Huniepop 1, the character icons done in the original Honeycam Studio art style are a constant reminder that this game treats its pre-date, aka dating sim aspects in air quotes, as purely functional A to B intermissions. These women are here for your conquest, not because you want to get to know them. Huniepop 1 didn't have an ending. Although there was an objective win state that involved sleeping with all 12 characters in-game, this only unlocks Endless Mode, or Alpha Mode as the game calls it. Huniepop 2 also includes an Alpha Mode and a Non-Stop Mode, but it also has a goal, a quota, and an ending proper. In other words, after 8 pairs of fairy wings, I started to understand Huniepop 2 on a visceral level. Not as a cutesy hentai dating sim RPG, but as an honest-to-God strategy puzzle game. The women in Huniepop 1 are varied and detailed, but if I had to seriously critique it, I would say they're not all varied and detailed enough. The women in Huniepop 2 are comparatively varied but feel wafer thin compared to the substantive ladies of Huniepop 1. In other words, the women in Huniepop 2 feel shallow. Let me return to that quote from Reddit user Johnny11895. The women of Huniepop 2 are gameplay modifiers dressed up as girls. Or rather, they're fully functioning as intended. This is a change that is both extremely necessary and utterly contentious for the type of game Huniepop 2 is. I firmly believe that this decision makes Huniepop 2 a much more interesting game, but being the more interesting game does not make Huniepop 2 the better game. I played through Huniepop 2 on the incel difficulty to start with because the hard difficulty of Huniepop 1 did not feel difficult in the slightest. I will admit now that I severely underestimated Huniepop 2's idea of hard. As someone who's now played through both the incel and average guy difficulty levels of Huniepop 2, I can only describe the leap in difficulty this way. Average guy is my ideal difficulty for Huniepop 2. It's exactly what I wanted out of the game, and my experience with it was thoroughly enjoyable. The incel difficulty level is Huniepop 2 on Ultra Nightmare, and I genuinely believe I made a mistake by starting and finishing the game first on this difficulty setting. Incel is Huniepop 2 cranked up to 11. Incel is Huniepop 2 with brass knuckles and a grudge. Incel is a truly cruel Huniepop experience. As someone who has since played through the game again on the average difficulty, I'll admit that my first playthrough of the game soured my initial perspective on it. Any criticism or potential changes I would have made to balancing the difficulty were immediately addressed in my average guy playthrough. Well, most of my criticism was addressed anyways. I still think that having to waste one block of stamina when giving a girl a smoothie, a unique gift, or a pair of shoes doesn't contribute anything to the pre-date intermission. Otherwise, average guy is a genuinely good time. I think it's a perfect difficulty jump from the first game to the second, but then again I only played this difficulty after having conquered Incel.
But I just love collecting antiques.
That being said, I suppose it's time to talk about what I've been avoiding talking about for nearly this entire video. The second major change beyond the double date aspect of Huniepop 2 and the stamina meter is the widely touted and controversial gameplay addition, Baggage. Baggage is Huniepop 2's real main gimmick. The main focus of the double date mechanic is stamina preservation, not only setting up big combos, but setting up big combos that can be pulled off without exhausting or upsetting either girl. For me, the double date aspect is just fine. I think it adds a lot of flavor to the sequel that wouldn't have been there otherwise, but like I said before, although the addition of stamina does create some interesting scenarios, it also adds a lot of frustration, which I'll discuss more at the end of the section. Baggage represents the aforementioned gameplay modifiers assuming the role of a virtual woman. While I've come to quote Reddit user Johnny11895 several times already, I don't think I can more eloquently or aptly put the woman of Huniepop 2 into words. It's easier to say that the girls of Huniepop 2 are their baggage. Were this any other game, I think that the idea of baggage as a mechanic might be a powerful commentary on how trauma, character flaws, and mental or physical sicknesses can impact one's life. But because this is Huniepop 2, the game where you're banging two girls at a time to save the world from nymphomaniac demigods, the minimization of baggage ends up becoming the game. I don't mean this as an exaggeration, but I spent literal hours trying to come up with different combinations of date gifts to negate the many harmful side effects of baggage on my first playthrough of Huniepop 2. Although the concept of the double date can be easily grasped, the omnipresence of baggage definitely takes some getting used to. Talk to any girl enough and eventually a type of unique baggage is unlocked for her. Think of baggage as a permanent debuff specific to each girl. Although baggage is not extremely frustrating early on, around the midpoint is when most girls will have all of their baggage unlocked. Each girl has up to 3 unique types of baggage, their negative effects cumulative. This is where Incel mode begins to live up to its namesake. I was gonna rant about how insane this game's difficulty was. As a matter of fact, that's the main reason I started making this video. I wanted to explain how the baggage system could have been implemented better until I played the game on the normal average guy difficulty and I realized that the game already implements baggage in the way I wanted it to, but only on the average guy difficulty. Because on that difficulty you still unlock all of the baggage for each girl, but you only deal with 1 baggage per girl per puzzle, which is, manageable, which is good. That's not the case on Incel. On Incel, it's just pain. It's pain the whole way down. We're talking 3 debuffs stacked on top of each other for every girl for every puzzle. And some debuffs aren't even exclusive to the girl either. So for example, you go on a date with Sarah and... I haven't talked about Sarah yet. You go on a date with Sarah and Nora, and let's say you've unlocked all their baggage. Nora has a baggage called abandonment issues, where she drains 5% of the current earned affection when you right-click to focus on the other girl. Affection is how many points you need to clear the puzzle, by the way. Which can absolutely kill your run later on, but so long as you deal with it ahead of time, it won't be that big of a problem. So you need sentiment token matches to afford the date gift that nullifies the effects of abandonment issues, and this is Huniepop, so of course it's like shampoo or a tampon or something that magically cures a woman of her abandonment issues, and that's fine. Like, on paper that's fine. But then you pair that with Sarah's attention whore baggage, where she can just decide to force you to shift your focus to her during a move, thereby absorbing the successful token match and thereby unintentionally wasting an entire move on her because of RNG.
Pay attention to me! No, you're not! Not really! Not enough! I need more attention! I'm cute and nice and cool and awesome and Suki!
And we'll talk about RNG later, but man, the game gets extremely rough around the midpoint. One of the most infuriating dates in the game for me was Sarah and Brooke's second date. I don't know why I waited so long to finish their second date, but if I recall correctly, both women had all of their baggage, and even with 5 extra moves, I think I must have failed this encounter upwards of 5 or 6 times total. Never mind that Brooke's unsentimental debuff causes 20% less sentiment tokens to drop. It's unsentimental mixed with Gold Digger that turns this encounter into a waking nightmare. Brooke will take an extra move whenever someone besides her receives a date gift unless she's exhausted or upset. My strategy was simple. Earn enough sentiment to give Brooke the lube gift and then the spring rain gift, which causes more sentiment tokens to drop, thereby counteracting the unsentimental baggage. Because lube reduces the cost of all date gifts by 2 sentiment tokens, that means that the spring rain gift can be used for free directly after using lube. Now, to manage Brooke's Gold Digger baggage, 2 options are available. Option 1 is to use another date gift to cancel the effects of this baggage for the remainder of the date, although it'll cost another 4 sentiment. Or option 2, which is to purposely make Brooke upset or exhausted and use the interim to give the necessary gifts to Sarah. But option 2 requires a lot of forethought and, more importantly, a lot of preparation. It also means that players risk being unable to use Sarah's date gifts for a considerable portion of the date, likely until Sarah has enough sentiment to use all of her date gifts at once, which puts players at a massive disadvantage. Sarah's baggage, annoying as fuck, certainly describes her well. Much like attention whore, it's based on chance. There's a 15% chance for every turn taken with Sarah that she'll leave behind a broken heart token. This baggage can turn the board into a literal minefield if left unchecked. You might be thinking, just give her another date gift, you can still get rid of the broken heart tokens. And you're right, but I've neglected to mention Brooke's third and final baggage, expensive tastes, meaning you won't be able to give her any plushie or souvenir gifts. And plushie gifts are the only gifts that can get rid of broken heart tokens. Unless you're using the purple flower item, which I forget the name of, but that actually consumes the broken heart tokens, which makes the recipient upset and puts them out of commission for 4 turns, which is still, a legitimate strategy, but still. You either have to deal with Brooke's baggage by using another date gift or purposely exhaust or upset her to give Sarah the plushie date gift because for whatever reason, every baggage type that includes the phrase won't allow X or Y gifts also applies to the other girl as well, meaning that if you can't give Brooke plushie or souvenir gifts, you can't give Sarah plushie or souvenir gifts either. Truthfully, it is an interesting dilemma, and it reminds me of the think box and the play box we discussed earlier. It's definitely not a perfect analogy, and I don't think it's analogous at all. I think Huniepop 2 is a Matryoshka doll of think boxes within a very large, cluttered play box. Every move has to be considered very carefully. Even one innocuous, unthinking move could have serious ramifications in another match or two. Again, it's interesting. It makes you think a lot about your setup before and during a date, but it also makes micromanaging your date gifts take up a lot more time than I'd like to dedicate to inventory management. After a certain point, some items will stop appearing in the shop, especially the items that cancel girls' baggage during a date, meaning that if you want to use that date gift with another girl, you have to find where the girl is located and visit her, remove the specific date gift from your inventory, and then find the girl you want to give it to later. In the first Huniepop, I had a long notes document on my phone which had a detailed list of every girl's stats for when they asked me questions about their favorite color, or their favorite hobby, or their birthday. I just didn't want to miss out on easy honey. That's all. In the second Huniepop, I also had a long notes document on my phone which was not a detailed list of every interesting fact I had learned about a specific girl, but instead a list of loadouts for each girl that I'd known to be effective during my dates with them. I had to get creative, especially with Leilani, considering her baggage severely limits a player's options, and I suppose this is where the game started to break down for me. I couldn't perceive these virtual women as anything else besides challenges to be overcome. I could only see them as a small collection of irritating, lingering debuffs that I would have to carefully consider at every step of my progress, and I dedicated almost as much time planning for a date as I did actually going on those same dates. I skipped through every girl's dialogue. I tested multiple combinations of the same date gifts and still lost horribly time and time again. I would quit certain dates at several moves in because a character's baggage was already interfering in ways I couldn't have predicted ahead of time. There was one particularly egregious case, one of the many attempts I had at the date with Sarah and Brooke, where I began the match at 25 moves with my strategy of obtaining 6 sentiment with Brooke so that I could give her the lube, spring rain, and feminine wash items in one fell swoop. On my first move, Sarah's attention whore debuff caused her to steal my first sentiment in match 3, swiping an essential 3 sentiment from Brooke. I switched my focus from Sarah to Brooke to match the other 3 remaining sentiment tokens, trying to hopefully recuperate some sentiment in the first 5 moves, only to have Sarah pilfer my second sentiment match 3 as well. There have been plenty of times during my gaming career where I've become irrationally upset at a game. One of the many times this has occurred was during a playthrough of Dark Souls 2 of all games, where I was trying to make my way through an area called the Huntsman's Copse. I'm not 100% sure what set me off, but I'm confident that it was a circumstantial frustration, the kind that boils over after several hours of repeated failure and little to no progress. I remember dying horribly. One death in the endless torrent of countless hundreds of others that I'd endured since the start of my playthrough, and surely the hundreds of others that would inevitably follow. Nothing more than a drop in the bucket, but for me at that moment, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I remember vividly slamming down my controller onto my bed, a cushioned surface, one that I thought I could throw my controller onto without fear of causing significant damage to either the bed or the gamepad. That's when I heard a sharp hiss. It was a sound I didn't recognize immediately, so I turned over and saw that where I had slammed my controller down was actually where I'd left my iPhone. There, I had unintentionally brought down my controller with such force as to completely shatter its screen. All I could do was take a deep breath, clean up the broken glass on my bedspread, and turn the game off. I could only tell myself, I need to take a break. Believe it or not, I felt the exact same thing during this date with Sarah and Brooke. At a certain point, you have to stop blaming the game and you have to stop blaming yourself as well. How you feel towards any game will depend on the circumstances and in how you approach it. I learned that on that one fateful night playing Dark Souls 2. Frustration is a drop in the bucket. Learning how to approach a problem in a Souls game and in most video games is the first step to achieving victory. And maybe during this point in the video is when you start to notice that I'm using language that would imply we're trying to fight these women, going into battle, engaging in mortal combat with them. In truth, yes, we are going into battle with them. Love is war, and we're taking everything we can and making out like thieves. Because we're only a little under halfway there, and once we're at the end, the last leg of our journey will be the most difficult yet. Strap in, steel your resolve. We're almost there. On its hardest difficulty, intentionally or otherwise, Huniepop 2 posits a very disputable claim. Women are their baggage. As these women come to trust you, so too do their less than satisfactory character traits fully emerge. Character traits that the player must adapt to or fail and be lost to the tides of mundaneness and mediocrity. In the fog of love, or rather, the fog of war, it can be difficult to know one's true intentions. What is meant by the customary niceties and recreational engagements that are inherent in getting to know someone? Is wanting to get to know someone the same as expressing interest in someone? Huniepop 2 posits that knowing is a gift and a curse, that knowledge offers an opportunity to grow and adapt, but also presents the obstacle of accommodation to the truth that knowledge entails. Maybe ignorance is bliss. The women that populate Huniepop 2's world are blissfully unaware of the fact that they're being used, taken advantage of, soldiers in a war of attrition, the battlefield of their soul. Being corrupted by the maelstrom of supposed love, lust, and the making and breaking of societal conventions. Using trust to destroy the boundaries of moral soundness and initiating a truly depraved transformation, a metamorphosis of the most sacred act of intimacy imaginable. Yes, the women in this world are being taken advantage of, their unfortunate position in this cosmic game of Candy Crush forever obfuscated by their animalistic, obsessive need for increasingly adventurous modes of intercourse. They will forever be blind to the truth, that this fleeting world is nothing but sex. Are we the players supposed to feel guilty? Is the burden of knowing this infallible truth and albatross we are to wear our only duty to play along to the whims of conquest and total domination of others? How can we face our past, nay, our future, with this knowledge that has been imparted to us? This is a side note, and yes, I know that Zoe is technically an exception to this rule. She's the only character that actually has some self-awareness, and that makes her, an outlier. She's Zoe, I don't know, and she's also, a lot of people don't like her, even though, and I mean, Kyu literally says this, like, you've already dated an alien, and she does sound a lot like Celeste from the first game, and you can even unlock an outfit for her that is literally Celeste's outfit from the first game, but I still really like Zoe, and I think that she doesn't get enough praise, so, oh yeah, and I think it's also a good time to discuss the characters finally, so, I'm gonna start with broad strokes first. I think Huniepop 2 takes a few steps in the right direction in regards to how its women are characterized. Specifically compared to the first game, where the only time we see two characters interact with each other is when you're meeting somebody new. There's always a short conversation where one girl is talking to another girl and it characterizes them well, especially Tiffany and Kiana. That's probably one of my favorite character interactions in Huniepop 1, and actually between both games probably, because, it's just so wholesome. Huniepop 2 is all about getting two girls to agree to a double date. Or, well, not really agree, because they're always willing to go on a date no matter what. You don't really have to do any legwork there. It's pulling off a successful date that's the tricky part.
Never.
Anyways, this means that we still have the character introductions where they talk to each other, but we also have the pop quiz dialogue options where if you ask the girl something and she responds in a way that the other girl likes, then she'll say something like, oh yeah, I like that too, or that's my favorite too. So instead of in Huniepop 1 where girls get pissed at you for asking the same question twice, you kinda have to in this game. Which is fine. I think it has a better function in terms of gameplay, like a little memory game. Other than that, though, you only really have them interact after a successful date. I think a lot of people have gone on to say that Huniepop 2 improves upon the relationships between women, but I'd say it's a very marginal improvement. They definitely talk to each other more now, but that's only because the double date aspect necessitates both women talking to each other. It's a functional change, like most things in Huniepop 2, but it's not there to add a lot of character. And that's not to say that it doesn't add character. I really like Lola and Nora's initial interactions and dialogue after their first successful date, but it's very short and it's very situational. Just like in Huniepop 1, however, each girl's intro conversation only happens once, and again, they're functional, they're improvements, but they're nothing exceptional either. One of the many problems I have with Huniepop 2, and I'll bring up the Johnny11895 quote again, the women feel like gameplay modifiers dressed up as girls. This makes dates more interesting, absolutely, and I won't deny that, but for me, it cheapened any kind of connection I thought I had or even wanted with any given character. Ashley isn't the cool, snarky British punk girl. She's the girl you can't focus on for more than 4 moves or match 2 of the same token types and 2 back-to-back moves. And I know people make a big deal out of ranking Huniepop girls, and this is an aside, but if you're watching this video right now and you know who you are,
I know it was you.
If you put Jessie at the bottom of your character tier list for some hand-wavy reason, like she's too old or she's a bad mom, granted, everyone is entitled to their opinions, even bad ones, but if you then go on to put characters like, let's say, for example, Momo or Audrey in your top 3, I think you should reconsider. I won't elaborate on that because, I mean, I already typed out like 2 paragraphs on why, and then I deleted them because, I mean, this video is already so long, and I can't waste all of it getting mad at other people for their fictional taste in women, but Momo? Really? Really? Momo? Top 3. Momo. The player in Huniepop 1 and 2 is canonically a scumbag. He or she is a person dating upwards of 12 people at once, cheating on all of them behind each other's backs, and doing so without any signs of stopping. Audrey's character bio in Honeycam Studio even mentions that she realized that the last person she opened up her heart to was cheating on her with like 10 other chicks, and that Audrey developed a bitter hatred of men and fell to hard drugs to escape the emotional pain. I know that the canonicity of Honeycam Studio is dubious at best, and the timeline makes even less sense considering Audrey is only 18 in Honeycam, despite it taking place after the events of the first Huniepop, maybe? But we could also just say that she was lying about her age or something, and even so that's still something implied to have been directly caused by the protagonist of Huniepop 1. You, the player, did this shitty thing, and you can't just ignore your part in this poor girl's emotional nosedive. Again, the player's hands are not clean during any of this. Although you can try to distance yourself from your virtual persona at any time you want, you, the player, unintentionally or otherwise, did have a hand in hurting Audrey Belrose. Jessie May returns in Huniepop 2, and the fact that you absolutely slept with her daughter during the events of Huniepop 1 is lampshaded but never fully discussed. Again, it's a looming reminder of your transgressions. How far is too far? Is sleeping with Kiana's older sister after presumably falling out of contact with her too far? Is sleeping with Audrey's aunt after basically ruining her trust in men too far? Huniepop doesn't answer any of these questions because Huniepop doesn't pass judgment on its players. Huniepop 2 is not the Spec Ops The Line of Candy Crush Saga smut games. Although you can feel remorse for your actions, you are technically justified in your actions because the plot demands it. Even if the ends do justify the means, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
She's married. So? You already railed the blonde one's daughter, so don't tell me you're developing a conscience now.
Speaking of the road to hell, I've decided to use Pistachio's guide, The Best Way to Rank the Huniepop 2 Girls, to rank the Huniepop 2 girls so I can talk about them individually one at a time. Unfortunately, I was left with a 6-way tie in number 11 through 6, so eventually I had to rank them according to my own personal taste and preferences. I'll go in depth on each one so I can explain my reasoning. At number 12, the bottom of the barrel, and this should come as a surprise to nobody, is none other than Sarah, also known as Suki Stevens. Sarah is probably everyone's least favorite Huniepop girl by a country mile. I've seen some people say that she's not as bad as everyone claims, or that they even like her, but I think these people are actually internet trolls trying to get a rise out of us normal people. Sarah is disgustingly obsessed with all things anime and Japanese. She's an ugly stereotype and one that is grating on the senses from the moment she is introduced. I was really hoping to eventually come around on Sarah, but after completing all 8 of her unique dates, I can safely say that she has no redeeming qualities.
You smell that? It smells like a fucking weeb.
Again, as I've mentioned before, the attention whore baggage makes Sarah a very nasty customer. She can steal any move from the player at any time, and if the proper steps aren't taken to nullify the effects of Sarah's baggage, there's a good chance she'll be raring and eager to ruin a match 4 or 5 when you've got your tokens lined up just right.
Shut up! Shut up!
Guess what?
Shut up!
My big old butt.
Shut up!
I wholeheartedly believe that Sarah is a character that you are supposed to hate by design, and if that's the case, mission accomplished, but at what cost? Sarah will at least have the easiest designation of certified worst girl on any Huniepop player's tier list. Other than that, her existence is a burden on all of us. Number 11 might be a surprising pick for some people. Brooke Belrose, Audrey Belrose's aunt by marriage, was a character that I was anticipating being one of my favorites diving into Huniepop 2 for the first time. But that was then, and this is now. Her voice is gorgeous, her default outfit is sexy. Other than that, Brooke Belrose is a truly heinous and morally bankrupt woman. I know I've gone on record as saying that the player character is morally bankrupt, and I stand by that, but even independent of the player's actions, Brooke is a truly, unapologetically, morally bankrupt woman.
Just like my husband.
She cheats on her husband, leaves the kids to him, and is both a horrifically unempathetic sociopath that doesn't like to give money to homeless people, and that's on top of being a manipulative gold digger. And she's still not as bad as Sarah. The gold digger baggage specifically makes using date gifts on another girl during a date a penalty costing 1 extra move. It's an annoying hindrance, but at the very least one that characterizes Brooke's spiteful behavior very plainly. Another woman related to a character from the first Huniepop, my pick for number 10 is Nora Del Rio. While not nearly as morally bankrupt as Brooke, her introduction still paints the portrait of either a thief or a kleptomaniac. After the first successful date with Lola, we have one of the few character building moments where Nora owns up to stealing some of Lola's jewelry, and after hearing Nora's reasons, Lola decides to let Nora have it.
You can have it.
Because Lola is a good character, and I'm glad she returned, and this is one of the few moments where one of the characters does something selfless for a change of pace. Nora Del Rio is characterized as a person who does what she has to. She has a criminal background, she steals things, and she even sells cocaine to Candace, so she's also kind of an enabler as well. Even disregarding the harmful stereotypes and prejudices expressed through Nora, however, I think that I didn't exactly enjoy the time I spent with her. It's neat that she's related to Kiana from the first game. I like her voice and her outfits. Her baggage is where I have to draw the line. Emotionally guarded doubles the amount of broken heart tokens that are dropped. This would be terrible if not for the fact that Nora is immune from broken heart token matches with this baggage enabled. I actually think this is one of the more interesting baggage mechanics in the game overall, and it actually emphasizes the strength of the double date mechanic too. Nora can clear a board of broken heart tokens easily, but they won't give any affection, and it'll also cost a move. If the player doesn't clear the board with Nora, however, there's a very real chance that the other girl might accidentally match 3 or more broken heart tokens and become upset. So the dilemma here is how to utilize Nora's baggage and win. However, I now have to discuss what I consider to be one of my least favorite baggage in the entire game. Abandonment issues, which drains 5% of the current earned affection whenever the player right-clicks to focus on the other woman. This is a majorly debilitating debuff. It doesn't register when making a move, it registers in between moves for as many times as you are not focused on Nora specifically. This is a baggage that demands your attention immediately. The same with Sarah's attention whore debuff, specifically because letting it continue for more than 5 moves into the date would be a catastrophic setback. Pair this with Sarah's attention whore or Candace's forgetful baggage and you're in for a bad time. Number 9 is a fairly uncontroversial character and maybe one you might not expect to find so low on this list. Leilani Kealoha is an all-around sweetheart and we love her very much, but she doesn't have a lot of zest. And I'll circle back around to this because in some ways she might actually be the best girl, but from a subjective and gameplay-centric point of view, she leaves a lot to be desired. Her outfits are probably the least varied or appealing next to Brooke's, and her character building is just okay. I'll only really remember Leilani poorly for her absolutely diabolical baggage. Although everyone up until now has been ranked considerably low because of a combination of their personality, behavior, appearance, and baggage, Leilani is only this low because her baggage is a nightmare to deal with. Low self-esteem is the facepalm baggage. You might forget this one exists half the time and try making a big move with a certain power token, only to receive no affection. This baggage nullifies the effects of any power token matches unless they're with romance tokens. This one is pretty annoying and something the player has to adapt to. Old-fashioned is a simple twist. Any matches with sexuality tokens will make Leilani upset, but only for the first 15 moves. On the hardest difficulty, that means only the last 5 or 10 moves depending on if you've maxed out your extra moves during the predate. On average difficulty, if you've maxed out your extra moves during the predate, this means you'll only be able to make sexuality matches for the last 15 moves, or the second half of the date. It's not a terrible baggage, but in tandem with low self-esteem, player options with Leilani are severely limited. Sheepish is a tribulation, a trial by fire. Sheepish means Leilani won't allow any hygiene or sex toy gifts, but not only for her, for both women. Hygiene gifts are used to cancel the effects of baggage, meaning that with Leilani active in the playing field, these crucial date gifts can't be used. On the average difficulty, maybe this doesn't sound so bad. On the hardest difficulty, this baggage is one of the most frustrating to deal with. Taken as the collection of gameplay modifiers she is, Leilani is the ruined sentinels of Huniepop 2. A lot to deal with at once because all 3 aspects of the fight are equally as dangerous as the other.
Do you understand?
Polly Bendelson is my number 8, and I was going to save my thoughts on the controversy surrounding her as well as many other characters for a later section of the video. But I figure now is as good a time as any. Polly is the first canonically transgender character in the Huniepop series, and how the game handles this fact is less than ideal. Polly being transgender was announced years in advance, and initial reaction to this reveal was mixed. After a straw poll was conducted to gauge whether or not the audience wanted Polly to be a skippable encounter, the mixed reaction to this straw poll and the results being about 50-50 prompted the dev to announce that an option would be added to specify your preference. I quote, "If you're into her as a trans girl, you'll get the full trans Polly experience. If not, she'll be a natural-born lady, just like the rest of the cast."
And here I thought all the charming gentlemen were gone.
I think the choice of wording here is very poor, although I don't think pre or post bottom surgery would have sounded any better. The entire announcement makes it very obvious that the developer was only intending for Polly to represent a fetishized woman with a penis trope common in hentai and pornography. Not exactly because he wanted to add trans representation into Huniepop 2. Personally, I feel as though the option to choose Polly's genitals is pointless because it doesn't amount to much in-game. Regardless of whether or not you choose innie or outie as the game refers to it as, this choice is only really reflected in a very noticeable bulge on the character model and the inclusion of one poorly photoshopped in strap-on box in the background of one unlockable photo, reinforcing the fact that Polly does not in fact have a penis while she's railing Brooke to Bangkok and back. In every other unlockable photo, Polly's junk is absent, The photo remains unchanged. Even Polly's encounter with Ashley, regardless of which genital preference you choose, clearly shows Polly with a massive erection that still remains partially obscured. It's this pointless choice that makes Polly's presence feel like more of a magnet for controversy than an actual character trait. I would rather have the option to choose Polly's genitals be removed entirely. Either give the girl a dick or don't. The middle road seems like a cop-out. Of course, I'm not saying that she can't be transgender. I think how Polly is handled in-game and through dialogue is perfectly fine most of the time. When Polly is introduced, the honeybee doesn't pick her up right away. Q is audibly confused about this, but the honeybee eventually does register Polly, to which Q comments, "It must have been a bug, because Polly is a woman regardless of which option is chosen." Some people were upset over this scene, but I believe if anything it reaffirms that Polly is indeed a woman, meant to be courted the same as any other. In layman's terms, equal opportunity. Regardless, the game will sometimes directly or indirectly reference Polly's assigned gender at birth, either through suggestive dialogue or through a cheat code for a hidden outfit. In my opinion, I would have much preferred had the game treated her as any other character, instead of constantly reminding us of her genitalia or her dark past. Just give her a penis or don't. If the option has zero impact on anything besides some minor visual elements, they should have just kept her penis intact. Maybe remove her bulge from the character portrait. In my opinion, that part is honestly unnecessary. Considering literally nothing else changes in game, I don't see why this would be a controversial decision. They're not real people. Just because you're playing a game where your character is having sex with all of them, that doesn't mean you're actually having sex with any of them. If you felt so much aversion towards a character for having a penis in the first place, so much so that you wanted an option to skip over any encounter with that character, that reflects on you more than the game. The controversy surrounding Polly is laughable, but mainly because some people cannot fathom the idea of a woman with a penis. Polly is literally only one character of the 12 on the roster. I had to fuck Sarah 4 times to finish the game, and that's 4 more times than I was comfortable with. At the end of the day, you don't have to like her, but then again, it's a fucking video game, so if a girl with a penis is all it takes to turn you off from the game taken as a whole, then your bloodline is weak, and you will be the first of your clan to fail to reproduce. Now that that's all out of the way, I think Polly as a character is very unmemorable. She's easily the most trad wife woman of the dozen girls you'll be inside of, but that doesn't mean much when you're engaging in copious amounts of premarital sex with her as well. Her main character trait is that she's obsessed with retro fashion. All of her outfits are pulled from decades past, and I really enjoyed this about her, but her personality just doesn't do it for me. Her baggage is easily avoidable if a little irritating sometimes. Mainly jealousy, which drains 5% of the total affection whenever a girl besides her receives a gift. It's a very similar penalty to Brooke's gold digger or Nora's abandonment issues, but not as annoying. It's still a hassle to deal with. I might catch some flack for this, but my number 7 is Zoe Green. Here's someone I don't understand the hate behind. A lot of people put her on the same level as someone like Sarah or Brooke, but Zoe is honestly one of the more interesting and memorable characters for me personally. She's one of the many returning characters from Honeycam Studio.
Hello, boss.
A lot of the appeal of Huniepop 2 is being able to interact with these previously flat static characters from Honeycam. Zoe was a huge shock because of this. I was expecting her personality to be Sarah 2.0 except a rebellious mall cybergoth, but the truth is that Zoe is a soothsayer and a psychic soldier. Her voice is monotone and her speech is very candid. Zoe knows why you're here and she intends to help you on your quest by any means necessary. The fact that she has some kind of latent psychic connection with the fairies somehow is just another example of how bizarre and otherworldly Zoe actually is. Even Q seems startled by Zoe's inexplicable insight into the unseen world. As far as character goes, however, I'll admit that Zoe is pretty bland outside of this. My favorite aspects of Zoe are her insanely varied and stylish outfits. Her baggage also isn't extremely aggravating as some earlier entries are. Her kinda crazy baggage clears an entire row at random after making a move with her. This can be frustrating when you're trying to set up specific moves. Other times, this can help clear the board of poor setups and introduce even better ones. It's a double-edged sword, and I think that's why I enjoy the challenge Zoe presents. Audrey is my least favorite character in the first Huniepop, so the fact that Lillian is my number 6 might surprise a few people at first, but hear me out. I dislike Audrey for her personality.
I hurt your whore feelings.
I did a lot of research before making this video, and one of the many things I did research into was, what is the appeal of Audrey Belrose? Among the several videos I watched and the discussions I read was a video explaining the appeal of Audrey and why she was the best girl in Huniepop 1. I'll say this now. This video put up some good points, but a lot of these points and fan discussion surrounding Audrey in general is conjecture and extrapolation based on some minor details that might not have even been intended in the first place. Earlier in the video, I tried to piece together where Honeycam Studio takes place chronologically, and even though it was, initially assumed that Honeycam Studio takes place after Huniepop 1 because of Audrey's character bio, the one where it's like, she caught someone cheating on her for 10 other girls, it definitely could have not been you, the player I mean. She is 3 years younger in Honeycam Studio after all. I mean, Honeycam is likely non-canon anyways, but imagine instead that the person who cheated on Audrey that is mentioned in Honeycam Studio is just whoever. And that is why her personality is so shitty and her trust issues are so apparent. And in Huniepop 1 you are wittingly unfaithful to Audrey, acting in a way that will force her to relive her trauma, and all the while lying to her face, wearing the mask of Audrey's perfect guy to take advantage of her, assuming the role of the plastic person that she hates so much. Audrey might have been a better character had her actual character flaws been explored more. As it stands, she's an intolerable, insufferable redhead with a drug problem.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
I'm not a fan of her. I don't see the appeal in saving her as I've seen and heard often expressed by fans of Audrey. I don't much care for her vulnerable side if the front she puts on is so utterly impenetrable that we never truly understand Audrey besides her trust issues, internalized misogyny, and rampant manipulation of men. It speaks volumes that the most development Audrey gets is when we meet her aunt Brooke in Huniepop 2. Audrey's defiant and socially unconventional personality makes more sense in context. Both characters manipulate men for their money.
And the 9-figure bank account doesn't hurt.
Both have double standards when it comes to women.
Still talk to any of the girls you used to fuck? Good. I have a thing or two to say to those fucking skanks.
And neither of them try exceptionally hard because men take care of their financial situations for them. Although it's mostly distant admirers in Audrey's case.
Keep spending.
Also, to be honest, I thought Brooke was Audrey's estranged mother until I looked it up on the Huniepop wiki and found out that she was Audrey's aunt by marriage. Meaning that Brooke's brother married Audrey's mother, I think. It's a little unclear there, but it would make a lot of sense if Brooke was Audrey's estranged mother because, well, I mean, she's not, but there's a lot of similarities between the two that I haven't seen discussed anywhere. And that's probably because Lillian is meant to be the Audrey analog of this game. But yeah, this isn't about Audrey. This is about Lillian, who is ostensibly Audrey's counterpart in Huniepop 2. At a glance, they're very similar. Lillian puts up a front similar to Audrey, but acts like more of a chronically depressed Molgoth than a shitty reinterpretation of Asuka and a 14-year-old's Evangelion fanfic. I think Lillian's wafer-thin personality actually endeared me to her more than Audrey because I knew a lot of people similar to Lillian. Maybe not exaggerated to such a ridiculous degree, but still. Her constant drawl and posing every response as a question were funny to me. Not like laugh out loud funny, but more along the lines of sharp exhale through my nostrils funny. I enjoyed her interaction with other girls. Her dialogue during and after dates made me enjoy her because I could tell that she was an actual person outside of a stereotypical emo character. Also, another brief aside, I've come back to this point in the script so many times, but I know that some of this also happens to apply to Audrey, and I don't mean to turn this into a debate over who is the better girl or anything like that. I mean, these are just my weirdly specific personal opinions after all, but again, I wish that each girl got more development, and that includes Audrey. I think there's a good character there, but it really doesn't come through in either the first game or with Lillian in this one. But I still think that kind of campy, doozy aloofness. Is that a word? Aloofness? I don't know. That's kind of why I like Lillian more, I think. And she also has the benefit of being in this game where each character feels not that interesting. So I base my opinion on what characterization we do get, and character designs and outfits, and mostly baggage as well. So put that down. The only aspects of her I don't enjoy are her lackluster outfits and hairstyles, and the asthma baggage, which drains an extra bar of stamina when matching 4 or more tokens at once. Although if you can cancel the effects of asthma, I think that Lillian's other 2 baggage are easy to deal with. Teen Angst, for example, subtracts an extra move instead of adding one when matching joy tokens. It's annoying, but all you have to do is remember not to make any joy matches with Lillian. The darkness switches the effects of passion and broken heart tokens, meaning that Lillian can clear the board of broken hearts the same as Nora, but also receive passion for doing so. Overall, Lillian is an inoffensive character that endeared me with her simple character design and manageable baggage. She also has like one of the most transgressive pairings in the entire game with Ashley because they're cousins by marriage. I know it's like only technically taboo, but wow. Number 5 is the impeccable Lola Rembright. She's one of the 2 returning characters from Huniepop 1, and I think she's just as good as she was in the first game. Kira Buckland reprises her role as Rembright. That's such a tongue twister. Kira Buckland reprises her role as Rembright. I think it's like the repetition of R's. Ra, re, ro, re. It's in Kira reprise role Rembright. Kira Buckland reprises her role as Rembright. Such a name. Okay. Hopefully no one hears this. Sorry, this is just another aside, but Kira Buckland is also the voice of Tubi and Nier Automata, among many others. Amber Lee Connors was the voice actress of Belly was apparently Chica in FNAF World, Five Nights at Freddy's. I just learned that. So that's something. That wasn't in the script. I just thought I would toss that out there. But anyways, Kira Buckland is a white woman voicing Lola Rembright, a black woman, and there's a lot of white woman voiceover artists in this game, as well as the first one. And I think the only actual black voiceover artist is used for Zoe, which makes sense because she's also a black character in game. But there's other characters like Abia and Nora who are Arabic and Hispanic respectively, that are voiced by white women as well. And I mean, I'm calling attention to it now because I didn't find a better time to talk about it, but I don't know, it's just weird to me. Like, obviously I don't know what goes into finding voice talent for a video game, and I would definitely be giving this game a harder time if it was made by like Naughty Dog or Rockstar or something, but it's an indie game made by a few people, so it's not really fair to compare the two. And I don't know if the voiceover market is that saturated with white women, but it would definitely make sense, and that might be something that bothers some people, but it's really up to the person. Your common sense and judgment if that's a deal breaker or not. It's not personally, it's not a deal breaker for me, but I always thought her casting was strange. Nothing against Kira Buckland, obviously, and I'm glad she does reprise her role from the first game, but nowadays it's a little strange, isn't it? Lola Rembright is still the same Lola Rembright she was from Huniepop 1. After playing through Huniepop 2 on the hardest difficulty, I thought I'd try Huniepop 1 again, and what shocked me was Lola's transformation from one game to another, discounting her appearance in Honeycam Studio. In Huniepop 1, Lola's favorite trait is romance, and her least favorite trait is talent. Given her fairly cardboard cutout personality of being a go-getter workaholic, a self-made woman, Lola wanting a steady relationship seems to be fitting. She isn't looking for talent because she's got all the talent she needs. In Huniepop 2, however, Lola's favorite trait is talent, and her least favorite trait is flirtation. While flirtation being her least favorite trait does make a lot of sense, it does beg the question why talent went from being her least to her most desirable trait in a partner.
Wow, time just flies by, doesn't
Her
it?
baggage is kind of a pain in the ass. Busy schedule drains an extra move every 10 moves. Miss Independent will have Lola refuse all gifts until she has at least 30% passion, and Caffeine Junkie makes it so that Lola will absorb all stamina matches. I think out of all of these, Caffeine Junkie might be the most annoying, but it's still not as bad as some other girls' baggage. Her outfits and hairstyles are also some of the best in the entire game. Her new default outfit is to die for, and her alternate outfits are even better, so yeah, Lola Rembright number 5. After a lot of deliberation, my pick for my 4th favorite girl in Huniepop 2, number 4 is none other than Candice Crush, aka Candy Crush. This one came as a surprise even to me, and to be honest, I have a lot of reservations about Candy as a character. She is one of, if not the most sexually charged character in the game, on top of being dumber than a sack of rocks. She works as a stripper too, but only to earn money to feed her awesome cocaine addiction. It's the combination of her intellectual disability and drug addiction that all my time with Candy was spent feeling sorry for her. I think it's one of the few times in this game where I had to really consider my role in taking advantage of these virtual women to appease the seriously pissed off space hookers. I think one of the saving graces for Candy are her pairings with other women. How Nora displays genuine concern for Candy, how Polly used to be Candy's babysitter, and even her encouragement towards Abia to join her in the strip club.
I'd be too embarrassed. You'd be real good at it.
Yeah, it's a game about having sex with as many women as you can, I get it, but from a purely aesthetic standpoint, her voice, her overly revealing outfits, her extremely dirty unlockable photos, all ooze the essence of sex. Also, she's genuinely polite and a delightful personality, and definitely one that I remembered long after the game was over. But her baggage is actually a point against her. Her baggage sucks. Forgetful I only ran into a handful of times, but I can only imagine how devastating this baggage would be if not cancelled a few turns into each date. There is a 5% chance per move that any gift's passive effect will be removed, and that includes for the other girl as well. So this can very easily decimate any date gift setup. The other baggage, Intellectually Challenged, uses an extra move instead of an extra bar of stamina for matches of 4 or more. Which is fucking terrible, but I usually just find a way to afford the date gift that allows me to cancel the baggage first. Overall, Candice is one of the better characters in Huniepop 2, although her baggage makes me want to slam my controller down hard enough to break the face of my phone screen. You might have known this one was coming. She's the first new girl you meet in Huniepop 2. Ashley Rosemary is my number 3, and man oh man, I was not expecting her to be this high on this list. From a purely character POV, Ashley is really cool. She's kinda like Kyu in terms of how masculine she comes off, very casual and dude bro-ish.
Thanks for the sex, homie.
She's not a fan of commitment, i.e. her attitude seems to imply that she would rather not have anything serious, and also because one of her baggage is literally called commitment issues. Her baggage was a point against her originally, but I think it's actually very manageable now that I've finished the game. Commitment issues doesn't count against you unless you're focused on her for over 4 moves, and she has a very conspicuous telegraph where she tells the player that she's getting uncomfortable, meaning that the next move you make will definitely count against you. And honestly, as long as you're switching between both girls often, this will never really become an issue. Also, mousing over the baggage symbols during a date shows you exactly how many moves you have left until Ashley is uncomfortable, so it's fine really. Easily Bored is another story. This one is another baggage I try to cancel the effects of as soon as possible at the start of a date because it's so annoying. Easily Bored makes it so that 2 consecutive matches of the same type will cost an extra move. It's hard to keep track of and it severely limits how you play any given date, but again, it's not impossible to accommodate. I would just strongly prefer not to have to deal with the extra mental gymnastics. Other than that, I'm not a huge fan of her unlockable outfits. They all feel samey, all red and black and whatever, but I am a huge fan of her voice. I love her accent.
Have you ever tried to suck your own dick?
I like her pairings and unlockable photos, and yeah, Ashley's fun. Maybe my favorite new character in Huniepop 2. My number 2 is Abia. It took a lot of time to figure this one out, but I think that she secretly won me over. Abia is another character who attracted a lot of ire, especially from the Twitter crowd of people who've played Huniepop 2 or who haven't played Huniepop 2 but are upset about its portrayal of women. Honestly, I understand where the outrage comes from. Huniepop 2 does not portray women in a very noble or positive light at all. Abia in particular is a character that has been described as Islamophobic, and unfortunately I think this perspective does hold a fair amount of water. I don't have any Muslim friends that I can ask about Abia's portrayal in Huniepop 2, but from what I've seen and read from Muslims online, the game does draw on some heavy prejudice from Islamophobic tropes, such as Abia having to leave her home country because of her sexual deviancy and being a quote repressed slut. The discourse surrounding this character has been pretty messy. Even more so when you consider that we can't really have an honest conversation about Abia without it degenerating into, why do you SJWs have to ruin everything? Or, this game is racist, sexist, misogynistic, and promotes rape culture. And playing this game is also a promotion of these types of behaviors. To make my position clear, I consider myself a bit of an SJW, so if you've made it this far and that's a deal breaker, sorry. But I can't refund the time you've already given me, so you might as well hear me out and stick to the end of this section at least.
Okay, I'll do that thing you let grab by your ear.
I think that Huniepop 1 and 2 are both extremely racy and offensive games. Some of the most racist humor is readily apparent in the gifts you give women in Huniepop 1,
God, you're so racist.
and there's other numerous examples of obvious racist vocabulary used against Asian people in particular at various points in Huniepop 1 and 2.
Case of yellow fever ever. Like a yellow plague.
Come on, man!
I felt supremely uncomfortable with characters like Sarah and sometimes even Candace in Huniepop 2, although the most uncomfortable I felt when playing either of these games was with Momo, the cat girl from Huniepop 1. In a game series that seems to relish in twisting popular Japanese romance tropes such as kudere exemplified by Celeste or Zoe, or tsundere in the case of Audrey, having Momo be a straightforward and inexperienced cat girl feels perverted and uncomfortable in a way that I don't like or care to elaborate on. I never experienced that same kind of discomfort in Huniepop 2 except for during Abia's introduction sequence, where her character defining moment is when she uses her position of authority as airport security to sexually harass Lola. It's a very poor introduction and one that likely wouldn't go over well with anyone else taken out of context. Hell, even in context it didn't go over very well with me. Personally, I feel there's some lines that cannot be crossed, and having hard limits is an important aspect of one's character. It likely reflects poorly upon myself to say that Huniepop 2 hit none of those hard limits, but that's not to say it didn't cross numerous lines. This scene being one such line, to the point where I would understand why somebody would want to criticize the game or even quit it altogether. After Abia's intro sequence, however, I feel as though she blossoms into a much better character. Abia is a chronically horny woman, as are all the Huniepop women, but Abia wears this fact on her sleeve. She is debilitatingly sexually aroused at all times, to the point where it's become more of a curse than a silly little character trait. Even so, Abia still remains friendly and personable most of the time. Her baggage is easy to plan around, and her self-effacing debuff, which requires that a gift must be given to the other girl first before Abia, also characterizes her as a person who doesn't want to draw attention to herself. Her character is a walking conflict, and it does give pause to what kind of lives these women would lead were they real people.
I'm not gonna stay here by myself.
It just so happens that this draws on a lot of common Muslim prejudice, or what is more likely, that her character is majorly influenced and directly draws from negative stereotypes about Muslims to add character to Abia's, well, character. At the risk of saying anything too forward, though, I also have to admit that discourse surrounding Abiya seems to be self-defeating. After all, this is bejeweled with hentai we're talking about here. We could go into detail about how the game objectifies women, but that's literally the point of the game. Women are challenges to be overcome, prizes to be won. It's an unfortunate fact of the gameplay, but not something that players should internalize or take into everyday life. That's not to say that games couldn't or shouldn't treat its subjects more humanely. But I think it does beg the question, why focus discussion on the representation of women towards a game that is patently about the fetishization of women? In my opinion, this discourse might do better directed at games that are patently not about the fetishization of women, but excessively fetishize women anyways. It's specifically that Huniepop is a match 3 porn game where the objective is to fuck every woman. The premise was always based in Carmack's famous quote, "Story in a game is like story in a porn. It's not that important." Except in this case, the game and the porn are one and the same. Likewise, I don't think that critiquing characters and their agency in a porn is much of a noble crusade. But then again, this video is already 2 hours long, so obviously I'm at odds with myself here. I also think it's interesting that so many people have sought to talk about these issues and approach Huniepop 1 and 2 as if they were regular everyday video games, and not the degenerate hentai Candy Crush fest they really are. The women of Huniepop exist to fulfill an arbitrary criteria of fetishes. They exist so that the player can conquer them one by one. Any semblance or similarity to actual people is purely coincidental, for they only exist to satisfy the player's sexual appetite. What I'm trying to say then is that it's difficult to critique Huniepop 1 and 2 from a lens of intersectional feminism, because both games are not only explicitly pornographic in nature, but hotbeds of political controversy and provide ample opportunities to pick and choose from a particularly egregious variety of racism, sexism, misogyny, unintentional or otherwise, and much, much more. All this is to say that I appreciate Abiya for her unfortunate position among the rabble of sex-addicted nymphomaniacs as a sex-addicted nymphomaniac who also happens to be a Muslim. Although she definitely could have been written better. Sounded like Linkara in the first take. Although she definitely could have been written better.
I've come to steal your oats.
Okay. My number 1 was a difficult choice. I originally had her as my number 2, but I did some soul searching and decided that Abiya was just not good enough to claim the throne. Either way, Jessie May is the second and final returning character from the first game and one of my favorite characters from Huniepop 1. I think that her appearance in Huniepop 2 was even better. Her character portrait in Huniepop 2 does a spectacular job of not only showing her age, but her ever-present sex appeal. It's a straight upgrade and one that I prefer 1,000 times over. Originally, Jessie's favorite trait in Huniepop 1 was sexuality and her least favorite was romance, but that being then, this being now, her favorite trait is changed to romance. Jessie is a character that has some history with the player character, and in the 2 years between Huniepop 1 and 2, a lot has changed. There's layers to Jessie May. Her baggage is an obvious indicator. She's not as young as she used to be. Her crudely named Busted Vag can only accept sexuality tokens in matches of 4 or more. She also has emphysema, probably her most debilitating baggage, which means there's a 1 in 5 chance that Jessie will not recover stamina after each move you spend on focus on her. This is indicated by a loud violent cough after a completed move. This makes stamina conservation with Jessie very important. Although my attitude towards women and their baggage in-game was usually done so in a disdainful manner, as with Brooke, Sarah, Nora, and Leilani, Jessie's baggage made me feel upset. It made me feel something like pity. Her final baggage, depression, only drains 1 sentiment after every 5 moves, indicated by a whining moan that Jessie utters. It's not a very troublesome baggage to deal with, but knowing that Jessie is suffering from depression makes an awful amount of sense. She's even more estranged now from her daughter Tiffany. She offhandedly comments multiple times that she wants you to meet her daughter.
If she ever stops ignoring me, I'd love to introduce you to my daughter someday. Would you be okay with that?
And your character has to smile and play along, knowing deep down that this is just another nuclear bomb waiting to eventually go off. Another disaster waiting to happen. Just how long can they keep up the act? How long will it be until the past comes back to rear its ugly head yet again? How long can we hide the truth of our actions from ourselves? Being the premier nymphomaniac on Ina de Puna, Abia is a massive fan of Jessie's. During their date together, it does seem like Abia genuinely enjoys spending time with her. One of their dates together is punctuated by Jessie remarking, however, that she's now long past her prime, and that nobody is calling her to do porn anymore.
Once you hit a certain age, nobody wants you anymore.
This frustrates Abia, but Jessie leans into it, resigned. She's realizing that her own past is catching up to her. Maybe it inspired in me the same feeling that was inspired in others, as in regards to Audrey. Wanting to help somebody but being unable to.
Sometimes I wonder, would I have been better off if I chose not to have my daughter?
Ultimately, these aren't real people, but in a game where every character is a wafer-thin facsimile of a persona, it's sobering to be able to catch a glimpse of a supremely human sort. Of a lifetime of piling regrets, lost years, lost connections, and having to somehow continue to push forward.
I used to hope I'd meet somebody who just loved me, mistakes and all. But that ship sailed a long time ago.
Jessie is not a perfect character, and that's why I have such an affinity for her. She's flawed, tragic, and wistful. She yearns for something better, and there's still hope that she can rekindle what was lost with Tiffany, to become the mother she wants to be. She's perfectly imperfect, just as Huniepop 2 is. Okay, rambling here. I'm just one take for this. I won't do another. And I discussed the controversy behind Abia's introduction already, but I haven't really mentioned or discussed these weird lines from Jessie after the date between Lola and her that imply sexual harassment at best and actual rape at worst. I mean, if you discount these lines, then I still think they're some of the best characters, but it's hard to just ignore them. And I mean, maybe I should take my own advice, because at the end of the day, it is a porn game, for sure, but there's so many instances where the game wants to take itself seriously that these lines feel out of place. I mean, hell, I'll say it. The game would be a better game with these scenes reworked and these lines removed. And now that I've played through it twice, actually, characters like Leilani and Polly are actually some of my favorite characters, even more so than Lillian and Ashley, because they're just so genuinely nice and like straightforward and don't have any of this weird problem with consent. Again, I know it's a porn game, absolutely, but it's not above criticism. That's the whole point of this video. If you take out the Jessie and Lola post-date dialogue and the Abia introduction sequence, the game is honestly better for it. What troubles me, actually, is the fact that this dialogue was even in the game to begin with. It reflects poorly on the creator, and it reflects poorly on me as well, because, I mean, I love Jessie and Abia's characters. Like, they're my top two. And maybe it is just a matter of lighthearted, playful, over-exaggerated porno acting, but that's not how it comes across in game. And, you know, granted, were this a Japanese VN or something like that, I know I'd be getting eye rolls and, well, it's a different culture and all that, but it's not a Japanese VN. It's a Western, not safe for work match 3 game, and stuff like this, even if it wasn't meant to be taken seriously, still leaves a sour taste in my mouth. And I feel like that's reason enough for me to draw attention to it. Like, this wasn't a thing in the first game. Like, there was racy humor for sure, but it wasn't like this. So, yeah, that's all I gotta say about that. And that concludes my top 12 Huniepop 2 girls. Although I had always intended to put this list somewhere in the video, I think it was truly eye-opening how many of my decisions were based on or influenced by each girl's respective baggage. In Huniepop 1, every puzzle date is basically the same. The only real difference is each girl's most and least favorite token matches. In Huniepop 2, every girl feels unique because of her individual interactions and types of baggage she comes with. This is great because it helps characterize these women through gameplay, but it sucks because at the end of the day this is still Huniepop, and during my initial playthrough of Huniepop 2, around 20 fairy wings or so, that's all I had come to view these women as. Gameplay modifiers with a pretty face, their baggage, and nothing else. Now that I've come out on the other side of Huniepop 2, I believe that baggage does play an important role in shaping one's opinion of any given woman. Playing through the game once more, all I can think of is how much grief I would have saved myself had I only played on a slightly less challenging difficulty. That would have been the sound option, the less frustrating option, but it also would have deprived me the opportunity of experiencing the trials and tribulations of the game's final stretch. Experiencing each woman as they were and are, flaws and all, and then adapting and overcoming. To deny this challenge would be to deny these women as they are, their truest selves, and I'm not somebody who gives up that easily. The Notes app on my phone reads like a war journal, an itemized list of optimal date gift loadouts, asterisk connotating shared items that would have to be retrieved between dates to be utilized for other dates, and even secondary loadouts for certain characters when paired with certain other characters. That's another point against this game. I would really like it if you didn't need to visit each girl to retrieve your date gifts. I wish you could just manage your date gifts in one menu. It would be a lot more convenient. My time during the final several dates were nothing short of painful. The bitter sting of failure was constant. The pain of dangling victory within one's grasp only to have the prize float into the void above as I vanished into the dark ocean of despair below. Time and again, all I could think was, I've done everything right. I've mastered the game and its treacherous difficulty, so why now am I struggling yet again to keep my head above water?
RNG, baby.
There are some things which will always be completely out of your control. There are variables you can't account for. In Huniepop 2, the aspect of RNG, short for random number generator, is used more as metonymy to refer to how chance is calculated in-game. On Huniepop 2's hardest difficulty, the RNG is rough. Most baggage debuffs are percentage based. This means that most missteps or problems are not usually something caused by the player, but a byproduct of the unseen hand of the game deciding to royally screw you at the drop of a hat. There are date gifts that allow you to mitigate the effects of most baggage, but it's impossible to have an optimal setup where the most detrimental baggage types are neutralized, because only several of the same item types can exist between all girls at once before the date gifts are removed from the shop's rotation of items to be restocked entirely. This isn't even mentioning how the puzzle board can be very uncooperative sometimes. This is harder to put into words because I can't give any specific examples of this happening, but there were just so many times where I'd be a few 100 points short or even less than 100 points short of my final goal, and I would just run out of moves or I don't have any good moves left, and it's just one of those things you'll have to learn to accept. Sometimes the RNG is just gonna fuck you over, and you have to accept that. Although this didn't happen nearly as much on the regular average guy playthrough, but on hard, so I struggled. I struggled to the bitter, bitter end. Then, at the end of my long journey, at long last, I had obtained all 24 pairs of fairy wings and began my march towards my final destination. The end of the road. Kiyu and I climbed to the summit of Mount NYMPHOJINN and began our accursed ritual to summon the planet-eating, galaxy-rending NYMPHOJINN. Although I had looked forward to the climactic confrontation, I also knew deep down that a truly diabolical final fight was in store for me. With the gift of hindsight, I now know that I was right. And Lord, do I hate being right.
Ready? Here we go.
The truth is that overall, I had enjoyed a majority of my time with Huniepop 2. Despite all of its flaws and imperfections, the game still appealed to me. Finishing dates was now more rewarding, not because I was breezing through them as I usually did in the first Huniepop, but because these puzzles were deeper, more cerebral, tactical affairs than anything the first game had prepared me for. I didn't want to assign the game an arbitrary numeric score indicating my like or dislike towards the game until having finished the penultimate battle. I went into the final boss fight with high hopes. Moxie and June's designs are really spectacular. Their appearance and attire is so celestial and exalted that I was immediately drawn in. The bombast of the orchestral soundtrack filled me with equal parts of dread and excitement. I wanted to know how this final fight would occur. My mind was racing wildly with possibilities. And then... Yep, it's a 4-part non-stop date with every affection meter maxed out at 5,000. On the hardest difficulty, 80 consecutive moves and that's it. The game leaves you to your devices. Every girl retains the same date gifts that you've given them, the offset being that every combination of girls is random. Every pair is left to chance. At this point I was feeling weary. Not only were my hopes for a cosmic climax immediately dashed, but I was also coming to the realization that the final boss was more akin to a boss rush, cranking the difficulty up to 11 and letting the game speak for itself. It's a shame too. Like I said, I really did enjoy Moxie and June's designs, but you don't see enough of them. At least you can hear their voices during the final fight, but that's about it. Now, the inner game design expert in me will also concede that having the final boss be based on the same woman you have been courting and conquering throughout the entire game does make sense, if nothing else. The fight is a test of everything you have learned up until this point, after all. But the capital G gamer side of me also couldn't help but feel a little disappointed that the NYMPHOJINN weren't their own insulated puzzle section. The game had an opportunity to do something really interesting here. Maybe the NYMPHOJINN could have had their own unique set of baggage which you would have had to adapt to as the fight progressed, and maybe the date gifts would have also been specifically selected for the player ahead of the encounter. The NYMPHOJINN also perfectly illustrates why the name of the game is Women Are Their Baggage, because again, despite the literal name of the game being Double Date, the true difficulty comes from failing to utilize the pre-dating intermissions to optimize the chances of success beforehand, and also RNG. Put another way, the double date mechanic does add another layer of complexity, but the baggage system is what actually makes the game challenging and not always in interesting or reasonable ways. Leaving the final boss fight up to chance exemplifies many of my complaints with the game overall. I didn't count how many tries it took me to successfully defeat the NYMPHOJINN, but the process must have taken anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. That might seem a little high, and I'll also admit that I'm estimating here based on how I know this fight plays out, so allow me to explain. Every date in Huniepop 2 will last anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes if we're assuming the game is at its affection cap pre-alpha mode, i.e. 5,000 total affection to finish one date, and there are 4 total dates required to win in the final boss fight. That means we're looking at anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes of gameplay per attempt, and if we're really taking our time considering the affection cap is much higher and our moves are severely limited, we can also assume our estimate might be closer to 30 to 40 minutes per attempt. 30 to 40 minutes is a lot of time, and considering it took me well over 10 attempts, I think that my original estimate of 6 to 8 hours seems appropriate. I have no way of knowing if this is completely accurate, especially because some attempts I quit ahead of time because I had exhausted too many moves, and because I didn't feel confident attempting the 4th round with less than 20 moves ready. Long story short, this turns the final boss fight into an endurance test. A gamble where you've nothing to arm yourself with besides the solace of fate that you might have never had a chance at winning to begin with. After all, we all lose to time eventually. I finished the NYMPHOJINN on incel difficulty with only one move remaining on Monday, February 15th, 2021 at 2:53 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I took several screenshots to commemorate the occasion. After all was said and done, I was surprised to be rewarded with 3 back-to-back-to-back unlockable photos of the NYMPHOJINN, Moxie, and June, laying their celestial bodies bare before their one true conqueror. My character returned to Earth only to meet Q and, surprisingly, be met with a heartfelt confession of love. Q admits her feelings for the player and asks them to close their eyes.
Don't just stand there and leave me hanging. Close your eyes and kiss me, you jerk.
The lights dim, their lips touch, and...
That's right. Kiss my big fat ass, bitch.
Also, you get the option between 3 different ending CGs, and there's no way to unlock the other 2 per save file. If you want the other 2 CGs, you have to complete the game from start to finish again on a different file. This ending soured my experience with Huniepop 2. Not even the Q love confession fake out, because, as I've made explicitly obvious already, there's no redeeming characters in Huniepop. Only characters more pitiful, more sympathetic. Not being able to unlock all 3 ending CGs in one run on one file is a real head scratcher. Maybe it's because it's a giant middle finger to completionists such as myself, or maybe it's because the game is taunting me, beckoning me to finish it an additional 2 more times to unlock everything. To that I say, no thanks. Another sidebar, and this is also because I couldn't really find anywhere to talk about this in the video, I still believe that the main draw and the reason people still play Huniepop 1 to completion is because of the fun puzzle gameplay. The not safe for work stuff being extra incentive, it's been 6 years since Huniepop 1, and the cultural gaming landscape has changed considerably. What I wanted out of Huniepop 2 was more puzzles and more sex, and I did get both of those, but maybe a bit too much puzzle. Much more than I was hoping for anyways. So much so that I think that the game could stand on its own merit as a puzzle game sans any pornography whatsoever. But even so, the game feels tame. Like, you see naked women and their naughty bits and all that, but it never really feels taboo, exciting, I don't know. Maybe the slew of pornographic titles on the Steam marketplace of late have desensitized me to the erotic thrill of lewd imagery. Even the bonus round feels less satisfying. Neither girl undresses, unlike in the original Huniepop, where the halfway point of the bonus round rewarded players by removing the character's bra. I'm not upset that it was removed, but it feels contradictory and not in line with the rest of the big changes that Huniepop 2 makes. If the goal was to make me feel aroused, then having both characters strip as the bonus round continues only makes sense. Sometimes I think that Huniepop 2 forgets it's a porn game. The CG art feels like an afterthought with a few exceptions, but there was never any point where I found myself aroused when looking at them. The only thought I had was, great, 1 more pair of fairy wings down. I know this sounds nitpicky, but the art genuinely doesn't do it for me in this one. Some poses are compromising and some scenarios can be genuinely exciting, but nothing ever made the reward satisfying. The dialogue is also not any better than it was in the original, and the humor hasn't budged an inch either. Even for a game with racy humor that already felt dated in 2015, Huniepop 2 still feels like it's towing the line and not taking many risks, despite having some downright offensive jabs here and there for seemingly no reason. The bottom line for me is that the game could have done any number of things with its characters and its content to create a more enjoyable pornographic experience. But that's not to discount the numerous changes and strategic improvements in regards to the gameplay, even if some of the changes are frustrating and oftentimes unfair. I enjoyed Huniepop 2 while it lasted, and although my opinion of the game fluctuated wildly during my time with it, I think my experience with the NYMPHOJINN perfectly encapsulates my thoughts overall. Every girl has to be equipped with the proper date gifts before the start of the final boss fight, although the fight can be retried as many times as possible without any real consequence. I had spent countless hours outside of the final boss fight, nay, outside of the dates themselves, setting up the optimal combination of date gifts per each partner. Although being able to swap gifts between partners made much of the pre-date inventory management aspect of the game tedious, being able to use date gifts which neutralized the girl's baggage was invaluable. There's no such luxury with the NYMPHOJINN fight. You have to make a firm decision. Who gets their baggage taken care of and who doesn't? Because the combination of women is random each time, your chances of success are ultimately left up to RNG. I think a better way of having done this would have been allowing the player to pick which combination of women they want from a pool, thus having some agency in choosing who to equip with what. Maybe the offset would be that the same girl can't be used twice, meaning that you'll have to date 2/3 of the woman in-game in a mad non-stop date dash to finish the fight. As it stands now, the NYMPHOJINN seem like an afterthought. Although there is so much build-up and braggadocio in the characters Moxie and June and in their grandiose fight song and arena, they amount to little more than a gimmicky challenge which is ultimately decided by fate itself. The player is deprived of agency and left to gamble with the gods, try their luck. All they've left to lose is time.
In the fog of love and war, what have we to lose ourselves but time?
Time, Dr. Freeman? Is it really that time again?
Huniepop 2 was hard. During the game, I was not very hard at all. That's my one-sentence Steam review. The original game holds a special place in my heart. Never mind its reputation as bejeweled with hentai, I genuinely enjoyed my time with the first Huniepop because, as many have gone on to confirm, Huniepop is a game that is much better than it has any right to be. Likewise, Huniepop 2 is a game that has much more game than it has any right to. Although it's true that people such as myself were hooked on the original Huniepop, not because of the smorgasbord of DeviantArt anime waifus, but the surprisingly intricate and fun puzzle gameplay, which also happened to reward the player with sex. Huniepop 2 has its cake and eats it too, but the dating sim influence is less apparent here. The quote dating sim of Huniepop 2 only serves to get the player into the puzzles, and the puzzles only serve to get the players into somebody's daughter's pants. Huniepop 2 is a puzzle strategy game first with a little bit of smut thrown in for good measure. Its focus is squarely on the gameplay, but the gameplay might not be to everyone's personal tastes, and that's fine. I enjoyed the changes made to gameplay, but there are still some design decisions that baffle me to no end. Why does it cost stamina to give women unique gifts or smoothies? Why isn't the shop menu more organized? Why are the most important date gifts taken out of rotation without any indication? Why do the difficulty options not explain the difference between one another? Why does the RNG suck? I could go on.
Just like my husband.
The actual high-quality CG porn that you can unlock doesn't feel earned like in the original Huniepop. A lot of people have complained about this. Not only that, but I also feel like none of the actual pictures do it for me either. After unlocking these compromising lewd photographs in-game, I felt nothing. Even after browsing my gallery, my trophies of conquest, I felt hollow. Although the CG photographs in Huniepop were much tamer by comparison, I think that I can finally explain why the CG in Huniepop 1 were much more appealing to unlock. The pictures were much more erotic. After every successful date in Huniepop, the girl would send you these candid photos of themselves, some of them revealing either accidentally or on purpose, with little captions attached. These photos and the attached captions characterized these women, which culminated in the long-anticipated sexual encounter. And when you finally unlock that final picture, it was really something else, man. The photographs in Huniepop 2 feel arbitrary. They feel there to be there. Some pairings make no sense at all. Any pairing with Sarah, for example. If you're playing as a male character, the CGs include the two women in a compromising position with your cum on them somewhere for some reason. I'd like to point to specific examples, but this is YouTube and I don't want to do that here. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that the CGs feel passionless, arbitrary, and unrewarding. Also, I don't know how else to put this into words, but the pictures feel super tame compared to what's on Steam nowadays. Like, your player character is never in any of the photographs, and I know it probably would have been extra work to add them, but it feels very disconnected from everything that's happening. I think seeing the player character in action would have, helped with that disconnect, but I don't want to call it ludonarrative dissonance because it's a porn game, but I never really felt like I was there, Anyways, in Huniepop 1, these photos were a constant drip feed of progressively lewder imagery, revealing just enough one picture at a time, like an hour-long striptease punctuated by several puzzles. And when completing a sexual encounter, the reward felt extremely earned. It was like seeing something you weren't supposed to, and it was very exciting in that way. In Huniepop 2, again, the photographs feel a quota. They're expected, and like much of Huniepop 2, the combinations and pairings feel decisively random. Huniepop 2 is a game about expectations. I started Huniepop 2 with a certain set of expectations about its content, its characters, and its gameplay. And while it wears the mask of a dating sim, the characters are paper-thin facsimiles of characters. They're cardboard cutouts of porn game pinup babes with the intent to arouse, all the while bending to the universal constant of debilitating horniness. It's the gameplay that's the star of the show here, and while that felt oddly unintentional in Huniepop 1, it's very obviously a deliberate choice here in Huniepop 2. Despite its priorities being centered on its philosophy of more smut more often. When I have to remind myself that the ball-bustingly hard puzzle sections are the foreplay and the payoff is one measly CG still image, I have to think to myself, is that all I'm here for? The gameplay? Not that it's a bad thing, but I came into Huniepop 2 looking for something, I don't know, more? More reverent with its characters? More real? Even though I was originally drawn to the first game with the promise of premarital sex and the like, I found that didn't ring true with Huniepop 2. I wanted something more. I wanted a real connection to the game and its characters, and unfortunately I wasn't able to find that here. Huniepop 2 still left me feeling satisfied, just not hungry for anything else. I'm perfectly content putting the game down and likely never returning to it. I didn't finish Huniepop 2 for the porn. I finished it for the gameplay, and truth be told, I did enjoy the gameplay overall, but there were plenty of moments where I was frustrated as well. I'll admit some of these brief spells were partially me exasperated with my own inability to overcome and adapt. Other times I was legitimately upset with the game's sense of difficulty and chance. Huniepop 2 did not surprise me, although it did require me to temper what my expectations were and enjoy the game for what it was. A strategy puzzle game bereft of, but still wearing, its dating sim elements. Once you realize this, you can enjoy the game as it's meant to be enjoyed. Much like another game, Dark Souls 2, which had its detractors after its release, it also takes a certain type of player and a certain type of learned playstyle to enjoy Huniepop 2 to its fullest. I feel comfortable calling Huniepop 2 the Dark Souls 2 of Bejeweled hentai games because I feel as though the Dark Souls 3 of Bejeweled hentai games, a game that expands upon, refines, and perhaps even streamlines Huniepop 2's gameplay styles and loops even more, hasn't been made yet. I think Huniepop 2 has a lot of flaws. Some apparent, some not so much, some that can be easily fixed, and others that are deeply ingrained. It's a complex game and one that I definitely feel pushed me to my limits as a guy who just wanted some more of Huniepop 1's simple puzzles. If I had to give it a score, I would give it a B for Bejeweled with hentai, and I would recommend the game to anyone who played Huniepop 1 and wanted a nightmare tag team difficulty.
Oh my, okay, calm down, Happy. Don't start hyperventilating again.
Huniepop 2 is a really good puzzle game, but if you were in the game originally for the smut, don't even think about playing on anything besides average guy. Come for the puzzles and stay for the puzzles. Thanks for watching. And that was Huniepop 2. If you're still with me, the video is like over. It's done. This is just me, the credit sequence where the person who makes the video just talks to you directly. No more Huniepop 2. Huniepop 2 is done. And I mean, if you've made it here, thank you so much for watching the whole video. I mean, this is 2 months of effort went into this, really. I'm not 100% sure when I started writing the script. I want to say sometime early March, and it is currently May 26th, and the video should be going up in a few days, or, hopefully. So, if you are, interested in anything that you saw during this video, or anything that I said I would give links to, please check the description. I've also will put links to the music that I used in the video here. You can see all the music I used in order of appearance, chronologically, in the description. This is like, it took an insane amount of effort. I've never made a video this long before. And a lot has changed since I started it versus now that it's, finished, it's done. Especially like a lot of stuff I wish I could have changed that I just, at this point, I just can't. So special thank you, of course, Garrett, for being my best friend, supporting me. And I forgot to mention this. Actually, I was talking to him and he brought this up. He actually bought me the first Huniepop as well, and I totally forgot about that until he brought it up. So he actually bought Huniepop 1 for me when it came out, and Huniepop 2, which is insane to think about. Thank you so much for all that, and just being my best friend and being a cool dude in general. Love you very much. Thank you, Silverwood Art, for allowing me to use your artwork for that Jesse section at the end of section 5. And when I had this video planned, I always wanted to have that artwork be there, and so I'm so glad that you agreed to allow me to use it, because I would have just been sad and understood if you didn't want me to, but I appreciate it. And if you are watching this now, thank you again. I really do appreciate it, and I love your art. And if you aren't familiar with Silverwood's art, they've done a bunch of reinterpretations and just a bunch of gorgeous Huniepop art that really brings the characters to life, and I really do love their art. So please check them out. I put their Instagram and Twitter in the description. Thank you, Rahu, for the Honeybee Camgirl Edition guide on Steam, and Pistachio for the best way to rank the Huniepop 2 girls guide. And thank you, Reddit users. I did not ask them if I could feature them in this video, but Anto77 Uwu for their high quality background rips that I needed. Johnny11895, of course, for the impeccable quote. I mean, if you're watching this video right now, right on, man. Thank you so much for the quote. And user Corrupt Soul Gem for the only other person I've seen that thought that Brooke was Audrey's mother. That was very validating for me. Thank you, HoneyDev, for a phenomenal game, really. I know I don't want to come across as too critical, but I like the game enough to make this video about it. I really did enjoy my time with Huniepop 2, but I thought there was a lot of things that could have been done better. And in addition, the Huniepop voice actresses all did a fantastic job. That is not to say that, my enjoyment of their characters in-game is indicative of how I feel about them. I feel all of them brought their A-game, and it really shows. So now that you're at the end of the video, if you're still here, wow, amazing. If you want to hear more of me, if you like me this much that you literally sat through to the end of the video, that's... I don't have anything to say besides thank you. If you want to hear more of me rambling, you can check me out at All Unsaved Progress Will Be Lost. It is a podcast me and my friend Patrick do. And we try to update every week. We try to get an episode out a week. So that is a fairly semi-consistent podcast that you can hear me on. You can also catch me on the Tonkatsu Boys Super Time Show, a podcast I do with my friend Eric that comes out just whenever we feel like it. It doesn't have any schedule, but if you like anime, I'm sure you will absolutely love this one. Other ways, if you want to support me, I stream on Twitch pretty frequently, so you can check me out there. I'll leave a link in the description. And even if you don't watch me, just dropping a follow helps. And if you like this content or like video game content in general, please check out my friend Miles over at Copbox. He puts out videos about old school games, Nintendo and the like, so if you're more into that, that's more your speed, please check him out. And my other friend, Dilly Mustardo, check him out. He's gonna be putting up some videos soon, and I think you'll really dig them. If you like fantasy, like Legend of Zelda kind of stuff, he puts a lot of effort into his stuff as well, and so I think it would beseech you to check him out. And of course, if you're still here, please consider subscribing. It definitely helps me out. And I hope to make another video this long of this scope again soon. I don't know when that will be, but I do hope at some point in the future I can. So again, thank you so much. And I hope you have a good rest of your day or a good night, depending on when you're watching this. I usually watch videos like this at night, so I'm assuming it's night where you are. So I hope you have a good night, and I hope you get a good night's sleep. And yeah, I hope you hope to see you again. See ya.
My nose was chiseled by the gods themselves. My body was sculpted to make portions of Michelangelo's David. You want it. You're a pit of despair. Frank, you disgust
I'm cringing. Don't you understand? If I were you, I would never make such a joke. I'd be embarrassed. That's why.